Chapter 958. Why were all the spectators suddenly crying out in alarm? That was because Long Fei Yi had suddenly turned around and circled one arm around Han Yunqi's waist. He pulled her close and lifted her chin with his other hand before kissing her domineeringly. Han Yunqi was caught off guard, but she didn't struggle. Her arms quickly circled around Long Fei Yi's waist, enjoying his domineering kiss as she responded to him. And as soon as she did, he became even more unbridled as he plundered her. His kiss deepened and grew more intense, treating the hundreds of people around them like air. If this was any other time, Han Yunqi would have avoided it. But she'd long forgotten everything now. She did her best to respond to Long Fei Yi, afraid that he'd think it wasn't enough. Afraid that he'd be dissatisfied. Afraid that she'd fail to live up to his passion. Amidst wave after wave of surprised cries, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi embraced each other and kissed passionately. They controlled the world and were under the gaze of the world, but in this moment, they'd forgotten all about the world. They only had eyes for each other. They were each other's world. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders were all stunned, including Third Elder. They'd lived for so long, but had never seen such a bold move. Just what were these two planning? Even Bailey Chiyu couldn't keep his cool. In his impression, His Highness wasn't an open-minded man, but rather a conservative one. Could it be that he'd been seduced by Han Yunqi? There was only one person in the crowd who didn't look up at the stage, and that was none other than Mu Qingwu. His head was lowered as he stared at his feet. The ones who should be bashful were the two shameless people on the stage, but Mu Qingwu's ears had turned red. He didn't dare to look at the stage. Fortunately, everyone was focused on the stage, or else young General Mu's innocence would become the biggest joke of the 100 Poison Sect battle. Thinking back to those days, how much determination had it taken for him to run around the streets for Mu Luiwei? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi kissed for a very, very long time. They kissed until they almost couldn't breathe, but Long Fei Yi let go of her. After giving each other some time to breathe, they immediately kissed again. If they continued to kiss, Han Yunqi was afraid that someone would lose control. Fortunately, he still stopped. Long Fei Yi let go of Han Yunqi's lips and pulled her into his arms before turning to face the crowd. This time, everyone immediately quieted down. A man of action never liked to talk nonsense. What he did just now was to tell everyone, especially the Eastern and Western Qin factions, that he was determined to get Han Yunqi. The alliance between the Eastern and Western Qin factions was also inevitable. Bailey Chiyu remained silent until the very end. The other elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had yet to recover their wits, especially Third Elder. He stood in front of the stage in a daze, as if he'd forgotten what he was here for. Long Fei had no time to waste here. He was about to take Han Yunqi away when a middle-aged man dressed as a soldier suddenly walked out from behind the group of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium elders. This was none other than Ning Cheng's most trusted Deputy General, Deputy General Shui. His armor was quite eye-catching, and the D character on his chest was even more eye-catching. Even if no one recognized him, they could tell that he was a representative of the D clan's military. Your Royal Highness, this soldier refuses to accept the truth that Bai Yanqing gave us. Neither do the Ning clan troops. This soldier earnestly requests that your Royal Highness distinguish between personal feelings and matters of state. Don't mix personal feelings with matters of national vengeance. If you're tricked, you'll lose face for Western Qin's imperial clan. His words were very direct. Soon enough, everyone quieted down. Han Yunqi looked at Deputy General Shui with a complicated look in her eyes. She always knew that the real problem wasn't Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, but the Ning clan troops. Businessmen valued profits, while soldiers valued loyalty. The old foxes in the Council of Elders knew how to judge the situation and know when to advance or retreat. But the Ning clan troops wouldn't compromise so easily. Once Deputy General Shui stepped forward, he'd probably stop fearing her status as a princess. The Ning clan troops obeyed Ning Cheng, not her. Han Yunqi guessed right, because Deputy General Shui's next words were very blunt. Long Fei Yi, why did you bring Bai Yanqing down the mountain for a confrontation? Why did you kill him with a single blow? Do you have a guilty conscience? Are you afraid that Bai Yanqing will tell you the truth? You didn't kill Bai Yanqing to silence him, did you? Actually, everyone present could guess that possibility. But almost everyone felt that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had no reason to do so. The enmity between Eastern and Western Qin was their family's grudge. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had once been irreconcilable enemies because of this. How could they join forces to deceive themselves and the rest of the world? They were the ones who wanted revenge, not everyone else. In the end, they were just spectators. Your Royal Highness Princess, you can't let down Western Qin's imperial clan and the D clan's loyalty. Your Royal Highness Princess, you mustn't be fooled by Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi has been using you this entire time. Can't you tell? Your Royal Highness Princess, just what did Bai Yanqing say? You know what's going on in your heart. You have to have a clear conscience. A few of the elders grew agitated as well, throwing caution to the wind to admonish her. Han Yunxi knew things wouldn't go so smoothly, but she always assumed that Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the D-Clan's military would question her in private. She never expected the military to challenge her in public. Was this the rhythm of a rebellion? If she insisted on joining forces with Long Fei Yi today, would the Ning clan troops really rebel? If Ning Chang was here, what would Ning Cheng's attitude be? Perhaps he'd be the same as the Military and Trade Consortium. After all, the Military and Trade Consortium were absolutely obedient to Ning Chang. Was the D clan going to force her to abdicate in front of everyone, threatening her, making her choose between Long Fei Yi and the D clan? Although she felt uneasy, Han Yunxi still replied calmly, Deputy General Shui, what kind of person do you take this princess for? How could this princess forget about national enmity and family just because of love? Western Qin's imperial clan was destroyed, and this princess was a victim as well. I've been living under someone else's roof since I was a child and suffered all sorts of grievances at the Han estate. I lived in vain for 20 years before I found out about my origins. This princess remembers all of this. If not for the internal strife back then, this princess wouldn't have had to suffer so much. Nor would I be standing here being questioned by a bunch of men like you. Let me tell you, Western Qin's imperial clan's hatred comes from family, but national enmity comes from Western Qin's imperial clan. You're insulting this princess by questioning her like this. You're insulting Western Qin's imperial clan. What right do you have to question this princess? What are your motives? When it came to the truth, Han Yunxi really was lying. However, at this moment, her indignation was not an act. It was real. The D clan claimed to be loyal to Western Qin's imperial clan, but aside from Myriad Merchant Hall's fifth elder, who else in the D clan was truly loyal to a princess like her? In this dynasty, the relationship between monarch and subjects was like that between generals and soldiers. Absolute obedience was emphasized, and the orders of the monarch couldn't be disobeyed. But how could the D clan act like subjects at all? Compared to Long Fei Yi's control over the East Qin camp, Han Yunxi didn't feel like a princess at all. She felt more like the sole orphan of the imperial clan. Deputy General Shui, this princess hasn't forgotten her enmity, but clearly recognized her enemy. If this princess hadn't figured out the truth today, I would have continued to be incited by others. Eastern and Western Qin would never see another day of peace. As Han Yunxi spoke, she looked at the crowd. Let me ask you, if Eastern and Western Qin will never see another day of peace between them, will Cloud Realm Continent ever see a day of peace? Will the common people ever have a day of peace? Han Yunxi's words were sonorous and forceful without a trace of guilt. As she saw it, the grudges of the past were already in the past. Whether it was individuals or countries, they should all look forward. Rather than cling to past grudges, it was better to live well in the present and plan for the future. Those who live in the past weren't people who loved peace. In the grand scheme of things, grudges, right and wrong, there was only one standard to judge, whether or not they could bring peace to Cloud Realm Continent. Cloud Realm Continent had always been a single entity that belonged to the Great Qin Empire. Only people with selfish motives would haggle over past grudges and national enmities. The common people didn't care about such things. They only wanted peace, stability, and peace. With such beliefs and perseverance, Han Yunshi looked down at everyone present, calm and collected. Very soon, cheers rose from the crowd. Mu Qingwu had long raised his head to look over, a smile tugging at his lips. Aside from his secret love for Han Yunshi, he admired her even more. It had to be said that Han Yunshi's words had struck a chord with his heart. As a soldier, he'd always believed that the true meaning of protecting the country wasn't hatred, but the peaceful lives of the common people. Too many people used the pretense of protecting the country and maintaining peace as a pretext to start wars, but they were actually seeking power for themselves. In this aspect, Mu Qingwu had clashed with his father many times. Although he'd been lectured and disappointed countless times, he still held fast to his beliefs. Today, hearing the woman he admired speak such righteous words, the admiration in Mu Qingwu's heart quietly turned into worship. Just like how he worshipped Long Fei Yi, he now respected Han Yunshi even more. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunshi in surprise as well. He hugged Han Yunshi tighter to tell her that he agreed with her words. Han Yunshi was both righteous and intelligent. Once she raised the topic to the level of Cloud Realm peace, Deputy General Shui would only fall into an unjust trap if he kept arguing. Who would have thought that Deputy General Shui would neither argue nor obey? Instead, he bowed and said, "Farewell," before turning around and leaving. As soon as he left, the other deputy generals followed closely behind him, along with the elders of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. They didn't even bid farewell to Han Yunshi. Watching their backs, Long Fei Yi murmured, "The D clan will definitely rebel." A complicated look flitted past Han Yunshi's eyes. The D clan's power was equivalent to the entire Western Qin faction. If they rebelled, wouldn't the world fall into chaos? "I won't be polite," Long Fei Yi said. He didn't even need to send a single soldier to deal with the D clan. With Myriad Merchant Hall's current situation, he could easily cut off the D clan's source of income. As long as their source of income was cut off, they'd only be able to last a year at most. "Long Fei Yi, no matter what, we can't waste our time with the D clan. Jun Yixie and the Northern Dynasty's emperors are both watching us," Han Yunshi said seriously. Chapter 9:59. How could Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi know that the dead Bai Yanqing was actually still alive? If it was just the D clan's rebellion, it wouldn't have been a big deal to Long Fei Yi. Although Han Yunshi had taken care of Myriad Merchant Hall's gambling house and auction house, these two businesses were now in their hands. As long as Long Fei Yi's Kangan private bank stopped working with the auction house's business would plummet. As for the gambling house, it had just opened in the few days they'd been at 100 Poison Sect. As long as the inside story of the new casino was leaked, it would basically be ruined. The 700 million taels Myriad Merchant Hall had paid for the deed would basically go down the drain. With Myriad Merchant Hall's current financial resources, they had to bear all kinds of losses to survive the harsh winter, while also paying for the D clan's various expenses, especially the Ning clan's. At most, they could only last for a year. Once war broke out, they might not even last a year due to the high cost of military supplies during the winter. When marching to war, rations and fodder came first. Without sufficient military supplies, they would lose half the battle. What could the D clan use to fight Long Fei Yi? Han Yunshi understood all of this. However, she was worried about Northern Li and Emperor Kongcheng. "Don't worry, Jun Yixie and Emperor Kongcheng will never make peace. Jun Yixie won't be able to send troops south this year." Long Fei Yi's grasp of Northern Li's political situation was very precise. In order to protect little Hellion Zuixiang had already agreed to all of noble Consort Zhao's requests and exposed Bai Yanqing and Jun Yixie's many years of conspiracy in front of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had previously cut off Jun Yixie's military pay, so they were sure to make a big move soon. Of course, Jun Yixie had another way to get his military pay, and that was to work with the D clan in secret. If it was in the past, the D clan might have had the financial resources to support Jun Ixia. But now, the D clan could hardly even protect themselves. In a sense, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi still had to thank Gu. If not for Gu sacrificing Golden Wing Palace's interests, messing up the three-way black market's casino and Myriad Merchant Hall's auction, they might not have been able to completely control the D clan's financial resources. After hearing Long Fei Ye's words, Han Yunxi came to her senses. How could she forget that when she was still in the D clan's army, Long Fei Yi had already held Northernly in check. He had enough military strength and financial resources to contend with the D clan. At that time, the D clan had been defeated and lost many cities. The reason Long Fei Yi took the initiative to make peace was all for her sake. Now, if the D clan rebelled, it would not be good in terms of military strength or public opinion. Why would the D clan do this? If they wanted to be loyal to Western Qin, shouldn't loyalty to Western Qin begin with loyalty to her, the princess? Long Fei Yi, is there any other way? If the two armies go to war, it will be a waste of manpower and resources, Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. Long Fei Yi chuckled. Fool, if you and I join hands, the D clan will completely become our subordinates. How could they be willing to accept that? These words enlightened Han Yunxi. It turned out that not believing the truth was just an excuse. The D clan was worried that if she joined hands with Long Fei Yi, the D clan would be suppressed forever and might even be swallowed up by the East Qin camp. Therefore, even though they knew they could not resist, they would still fight to the end. Han Yunxi smiled. So, they're worried that I can't win against you, and Western Qin will be controlled by him in the end. If the two of you join hands, I won't touch a single one of your soldiers, Long Fei Yi said simply. He had always given Han Yunxi, not demanded. I believe you, but they won't. Han Yunxi was a little helpless. Perhaps I should go back to three-way black market and do my best to make an issue out of Myriad Merchant Hall to avoid a war. Myriad Merchant Hall's elders were much cleverer than Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders and Deputy General Shui. If the two sides worked together smoothly, they could make a move against Jun Ixia immediately. If things didn't go well, he didn't know how things would develop. Long Fei Yi, give me a bit more time, Han Yunxi murmured. In the end, she still didn't have full control over the D clan. Everyone present was still waiting. Everyone present was a reputable figure and no fool, so they could tell that the Western Qin camp was at odds with each other. Many of them had been hoping to see a fight break out, but the D clan's representatives had already left. If the Western Qin camp was at odds with each other, then the cooperation between Western Qin and East Qin wouldn't go smoothly. There was bound to be a good show in the coming days. Many busybodies were looking forward to it. Young General, I'm afraid the D clan has ulterior motives, Mu Qingwu's guard murmured. Mu Qingwu glanced at him but didn't say anything. Like Long Tianma, he couldn't figure out why his father had gotten involved in the 100 Poison sect battle this time. Father had borrowed Emperor Kongsheng's hand to stir up such a scene. Why? Everything here was basically over, but he couldn't figure out anything. Actually, as he saw it, the enmity between Western Qin and Eastern Qin wasn't unresolvable. Even without exposing the Wind Clan's instigation, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi could sit down and negotiate a deal. Why couldn't they just bury the hatchet with a smile? The reason why the enmity had persisted to this day was because of the conflict of interest and the struggle for power behind it. Back then, the Great Qin Empire was ruled by two emperors, East and West, so there were all kinds of hidden conflicts. Otherwise, how could they have been so easily instigated? How could they have started a civil war over a flood? Behind all these enmity was an old saying, a mountain cannot hold two tigers. If not for Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's deep relationship, their reconciliation, and the resolution of today's misunderstanding, would the Western Qin and Eastern Qin really cooperate sincerely? Wouldn't they continue to fight to the death for territory and power, just like before? What enmity, what national enmity, what family hatred? In the end, they were all just excuses. This wasn't a personal matter between Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi, but a matter between the two camps. In Mu Qingwu's opinion, The 100 poison sect incident was enough to affect the overall situation. It wasn't the truth that had been revealed, and the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin had been resolved, but Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had mended their old friendship and truly joined forces. Therefore, he was very glad that Long Fei Yi had full control over the East Qin camp. Otherwise, the East Qin camp would also have internal strife. Who knew how chaotic this matter would be? At this moment, Long Fei Yi was looking at Bailey Qiyu on the stage. He asked coldly, "Bailey Qiyu, the D clan has many problems. What about your Bai clan?" Bailey Qiyu was on the verge of tears. He thought that as long as he didn't say anything, it would be fine. He could let his father argue with His Highness when he returned. Who knew that His Highness would call him out in public? How should he answer? If he supported it, what could his father say when he returned? He had come today as a representative of the Bai clan. If he opposed it, he wouldn't have the guts to challenge His Highness in front of the entire world, no matter how much he wanted to. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on Bailey Qiyu, but he didn't have time to think. He could only bow respectfully with his hands clasped in front. "Everything will be done as your Highness says." Now, this is how a subordinate should act. In comparison, Han Yunxi felt that her Western Qin princess title was nothing more than a title in name. Hurry back to the army and discuss the grand plan. We'll head north to fight against Jun Yixia. Long Fei Ye's words ended the battle at 100 Poison Sect. Not only did it incite discussion and suspicion amongst the crowd, but it also shook the calm surface of Cloud Realm Continent. Various factions began to secretly prepare for war. Once Long Fei Yi headed north to fight against Jun Yixia, the true battle of Cloud Realm Continent would begin. Once they were out of sight, Long Fei Yi took Han Yunxi's hand and pressed it against his lips. Smiling, he muttered to himself, "Long Fei Ye's wife?" Han Yunxi was magnanimous in front of the crowd, but she was a little embarrassed in front of this guy. She withdrew her hand and prepared to speak when a few shadow guards brought Gu Beiwei over. "Princess, is Bai Yanqing really dead?" Gu Beiwei had been listening from the sidelines. He couldn't believe that Bai Yanqing had died just like that. "I stabbed him in the heart and confirmed that he stopped breathing. I kicked his body into the abyss behind the mountains," Long Fei Yi said. Gu Beiwei finally believed him, but his brows furrowed. He seemed uneasy about today's events, but since things had already come to this, he closed his eyes without a word. He had rushed here to meet them for another important matter. "Princess, do you have any news of Lil Thing?" Gu Beiwei asked anxiously. Han Yunxi had been thinking about this as well. She shook her head. If Lil Thing was trapped by Bai Yanqing, would the poison storage space have shattered after Bai Yanqing's death? She really didn't know much about the poison storage space. She didn't control it, but felt like she was being controlled by it instead. She was being forced to cultivate step by step, so she didn't have much control over it. Gu Beiwei didn't know much about the poison storage space either, so he analyzed carefully. "Princess, if the poison storage space had shattered, Lil Thing would have come looking for you already. The only thing in the world that could trap Lil Thing was the poison storage space." Although they hadn't gotten any confirmation from Bai Yanqing, there was an 80 to 90% chance that Lil Thing was trapped in the space. If Lil Thing was in the same mountain, it would be able to find Han Yunxi immediately once it was free. Therefore, after analyzing it this way, Bai Yanqing's poison storage space hadn't shattered. "You mean Bai Yanqing's poison storage space hasn't shattered?" Han Yunxi was shocked. "He's dead, but the poison storage space hasn't shattered. Could it be that Bai Yanqing's soul was still in the poison storage space even after his physical body died, maintaining the space?" Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi felt goosebumps rise on her hands. What kind of space was the poison storage space? Did it have anything to do with her soul transmigrating here? Long Fei looked at her with a serious expression, his eyes so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. Gu Beiwei was also very surprised. He hesitated for a moment, then suggested, "Your Highness, Princess, why don't we take a look at the body first before we discuss?" Long Fei didn't object. The three of them waited for the shadow guard for a while before rushing to the cliff at the back of the mountain. They quickly reached the cliff. Bai Yanqing's blood had already dried and spilled all over the cliff. There were many poisons that the detoxification system didn't record. Although the detoxification system couldn't analyze them, it would still alert Han Yunqi that something was wrong. If it wasn't for the fact that they were in 100 Poisons sect, which was filled with poisonous plants and animals, Han Yunqi might have noticed Bai Yanqing's blood. After killing Bai Yanqing, Han Yunqi couldn't stand the incessant notifications and turned off the detoxification system. Long Fei Yi carried Han Yunqi while the Shadow Guard carried Gu Beiwei. The group quickly flew down the cliff and into the abyss. Chapter 960. Long Fei Yi landed first with Han Yunqi. This abyss was much deeper than they had imagined. It was like a deep ravine with a small stream flowing through it. The vegetation was lush and covered the sky. It was very cool, and even the air was humid. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi looked around, but did not see Bai Yanqing's body. They did not notice anything strange. After all, Long Fei Yi had stabbed Bai Yanqing in the heart personally. Moreover, after Bai Yanqing fell off the cliff, his body was hanging on a tree. Long Fei Yi had personally checked his breathing. After confirming that he was dead, he kicked the body down the abyss. Even if he was still gasping for his last breath, how could he not die after falling from such a high place? Perhaps even his body could not be preserved. They only thought that the body was nearby and were not in a hurry to look for it. Instead, they waited for the Shadow Guard to bring Gu Beiwei down. Han Yunqi was not in a good mood, especially in this abyss. Her depressed mood was written all over her face. Long Fei Yi had already noticed it. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry. You didn't kill him." He knew that what she could not let go of was the word patricide. At that time, even he did not expect that Bai Yanqing would say something like that and acknowledge his daughter at that time. Perhaps Han Yunqi could no longer stay calm from then on. Han Yunqi looked at Long Fei Yi and asked, "I told you to kill him, right?" She was indeed not calm at that time and could not think. Now that she thought about it, she forgot what she said to Long Fei Yi at that time. Long Fei Yi remembered very clearly that when Bai Yanqing acknowledged his daughter, Han Yunqi was stunned for a long time. In the end, she said to him, "I only trust you in this world. What are you hesitating for?" She did not have the heart to kill her father. She refused to admit that she had a father like Bai Yanqing. Long Fei Yi held her hand tightly. "Han Yunqi, you just have to remember that you didn't kill him. I killed him. Back then, the Wind Clan joined forces with the Black Clan and the D Clan to destroy my East Qin. I have to settle this debt." Back then, the East and West Qin had a grudge. However, the Black Clan was the one who truly destroyed the Western Qin royal family, and the Wind was the East Qin royal family. Today, even if Han Yunqi did not make up her mind, Long Fei Yi would not show mercy. Han Yunqi then looked up at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi said again, "Bai Yanqing is not your father. You are not the Han Yunqi of the Han family." "No, he is." Before Han Yunqi could finish, Long Fei Yi interrupted her. He said, "Why did Madame Tianxin hide her identity and marry into the Han family? Why did she have a difficult birth? Bai Yanqing clearly knows your identity, but he still refuses to acknowledge you. Don't you think this is too strange? He acknowledged you as his daughter at a time of life and death." Do you really believe his words? Although Long Fei Yi's words were comforting, they were not without reason. Han Yunqi looked at him as if she wanted to say something. However, in the end, she did not say anything. She was reflecting if she had been too impulsive. With Bai Yanqing dead, who would know about Madame Tianxin's past? What if Bai Yanqing was not her father? Then who was her father? Was he alive or dead? Where could she find out? Han Yunqi was silent. Long Fei Yi did not say anything either. He held her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. Actually, words are the most powerless. A hug or a tight grip was actually more reassuring. They waited for a while before the Shadow Guard brought Gu Beiwei down. "Have you found the body?" Gu Beiwei asked seriously. "We were waiting for you. The body should be nearby. Let's split up and search," Long Fei Yi said calmly. Gu Beiwei only needed to glance at Han Yunqi to know that something was wrong with her emotions. A faint smile flitted across his lips. Long Fei Yi was not waiting for him. He was clearly giving Han Yunxi time to calm down. It had to be said that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's actions regarding the 100 Poison Sect incident were rather impulsive. Gu Beiwei did not say much. Although they had been impulsive today, there was no better way. Judging from the way Bai Yanqing had waited at the foot of the mountain for so long, no matter what the truth between East and Western Qin was, Bai Yanqing would definitely sow discord in front of everyone. Cloud Realm situation had developed to this point. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had reached this point. If they didn't use this opportunity to find a reason to cooperate, what would happen between East and Western Qin after Bai Yanqing's death? Very soon, they split up to search for Bai Yanqing's body. However, when they walked around the area, they all panicked. Bai Yanqing's body was nowhere to be seen, including in the shallow stream. Only a pool of blood could be seen not far away. Your Highness, are you sure Bai Yanqing is dead? Gu Beiwei's originally pale face was now so pale that there was no trace of blood. If Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, then the situation was serious. However, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's expressions were even uglier. Long Fei Yi said seriously, I personally checked his breathing. He's no longer breathing. A sword to the heart. At this point, Long Fei Yi seemed to have thought of something and stopped abruptly. Hadn't there once been a person who had been stabbed in the heart with a dagger? Hadn't that person also lived well? Seeing Long Fei Yi's strange behavior, Gu Beiwei asked anxiously, what's going on? After confirming that he's dead, let's search again. Even though Long Fei Yi was facing Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei, he didn't reveal Gu's secret. All right, Gu Beiwei didn't pursue the matter. They went south and north respectively, searching almost the entire deep stream. It wasn't until the next morning that they reunited at the same spot. Could the body have been stolen? Han Yunxi could only think of this possibility. She saw with her own eyes that Bai Yanqing's heart had been stabbed. Moreover, it wasn't caused by sword qi, but by the profound frost sword. How could he have survived in such a situation? Next, Long Fei checked Bai Yanqing's breathing. As she saw it, he was being exceedingly cautious and even superfluous. The possibility of the body being stolen isn't high. Gu Beiwei said seriously, in 100 Poison Sect, other than Bai Yanqing and Jun Yixie who were highly skilled in martial arts, everyone else had won with poison. Even that girl Bai Yuqiao's martial arts were average. Almost no one in 100 Poison Sect could go down such a deep abyss. Moreover, sure Zhou had surrendered to Han Yunxi on the spot. Who else in 100 Poison Sect would take such a risk to search for Bai Yanqing's body? Since he was already dead, it was useless even if they found it. Could have been bitten by a poisonous beast. Han Yunxi asked again. However, when she said this, even she herself felt that it was untenable. Poisonous beasts that ate corpses were extremely rare. Even if they did, they would have left traces whether they killed the body on the spot or dragged it away. But besides a pool of blood, they didn't find any other traces. The three of them fell silent. Actually, they all had the same worry, but they didn't say it out loud. In the end, it was Gu Beiwei who spoke up first. Your Highness, Princess, Bai Yanqing might have faked his death. But he clearly... Han Yunxi was about to retort, but Long Fei Yi cut her off. Have you heard the Poison Sect's poison Gu humans? Back when he found out that Gu hadn't died after being stabbed in his heart, he had been investigating the reason. The Poison Sect had been caught by Medical City because of their research on poison Gu humans. In the end, the entire sect was destroyed. Rumor had it that the method to raise poison Gu humans hadn't been successful, and Gu's father, Academy Head Gu, had been secretly researching the secret recipe for raising poison Gu humans all this time. But did any of the Poison Sect's direct descendants succeed in researching the secret recipe? Did the Poison Sect's direct descendant gain control of the recipe and succeed? Who could say for sure? Who could guarantee it? Long Fei Yi hadn't believed it at first, but Gu's appearance changed his mind. Gu Yuntian's secret had been exposed at Medical City's medical skills competition. Although he'd been secretly researching the Poison Sect's secret arts all this time, it seemed that he hadn't succeeded in his research based on what he'd found in the underground chamber. It seemed that Gu hadn't been raised into a poison Gu human by Gu Yuntian. But Gu's immortality was an ironclad fact. So why hadn't Gu died? Gu was familiar with everything about the poison sect. Could he have used other means to raise himself into a poison Gu human? At this time, Long Fei Yi didn't have time to think about Gu. He only knew that immortals did exist in this world. When he killed Bai Yanqing, he hadn't considered that possibility at all. Time had been tight. First, the mercenaries and poison guards couldn't hold on for long. If they delayed any longer, sure Jiuxia wouldn't be the only one coming. The more people knew about this, the more troublesome it would be. Second, Bailey Mingxiang had also been poisoned, leaving Han Yunqi limited time to treat the poison. Third, the people at the foot of the mountain couldn't wait for long. Now that he thought about it carefully, Bai Yanqing was a direct descendant of the poison sect. If he hadn't died after being struck, he had to be a poison Gu human. Poison Gu human. Gu Beiwa broke out in cold sweat. Han Yunqi's face was deathly pale, and she didn't speak for a long time. The two of them had only just realized what was going on. Poison Gu human was enough to explain the strange disappearance of the corpse. Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, so they were in big trouble. Bai Yanqing had an immortal body, so they were in even bigger trouble. Long Fei Yi was the calmest of the three. He asked seriously, "What exactly is a poison Gu human?" There were many legends about poison Gu humans. Some said they were immortal, indestructible, and immortal. Others said they were invulnerable to weapons and poisons. There were even some who said that poison Gu humans were the evolved form of poison corpses and could be controlled by their masters. Gu Beiwei shook his head, and so did Han Yunqi. The poison Gu man was a legend of the poison sect to begin with. Forget them. Even the elders of Medical City might not have a definite answer. A complicated look flitted through Long Fei Ye's eyes. It looked like he still had to meet Gu again, even though he didn't want to see that untrustworthy fellow ever again. "Is there a way to kill a poison Gu human?" Long Fei Yi asked again. "Your Highness, the problem at hand isn't how to kill Bai Yanqing, but how to stop him," Gu Beiwei said seriously. "Once he shows up, everything we said today will be overturned." Han Yunqi was worried about this as well. Bai Yanqing only needed to show up, and he didn't need to say anything to overturn everything she and Long Fei Yi had said today. No matter what the world thought, the Eastern, Western Qin, and Eastern Qin factions would definitely be dissatisfied. Forget her. Even Long Fei Yi would find it hard to convince the masses. "Your Highness, today's matter lacked consideration." Gu Beiwei didn't want to say much at first, but since Bai Yanqing wasn't dead, he had no choice but to say it. Gu Beiwei and Han Yunqi were worried that Bai Yanqing would expose their lies today, but Long Fei Yi wasn't as worried. He looked at Han Yunqi and asked, "Do you regret it?" Chapter 9:61. Regret? Han Yunqi's first reaction was to shake her head. She had made this decision at the three-way black market and had persisted until now. Although it seemed like a wrong decision now, she did not regret it. She did not want to regret it. When she first learned about Long Fei Ye's childhood, she made this decision. She only had one thought, and that was to stand side by side with Long Fei Yi, hand in hand, and be together openly. This man's literary and military skills were unparalleled. This man's lofty ambitions were also unparalleled. This man had suffered unimaginable hardships as he grew up. She loved him, respected him, and felt sorry for him. This kind of person should not be bound by hatred. He should not live for East Qin. He should live for himself. Whether it was his ideals or his ambitions, he had the right to go further and fly higher. She did not want the hatred between East and West Qin to drag him down. She did not want him to give in again and again because of her. She wanted to be his support, not his stumbling block. In the current situation, the battle at 100 Poison Sect was their best opportunity. If they missed this opportunity, she did not know how long they would have to wait. Perhaps after leaving 100 Poison Sect, they would have to go their separate ways. Seeing Han Yunqi shake her head, Long Fei Yi seemed to feel that it was not enough. He looked at Han Yunqi and asked seriously, "Answer me." Han Yunqi threw caution to the wind and said loudly, "I won't regret it. East and West Qin have no grudges. There will never be hatred between us." Wasn't that what Long Fei Yi had been waiting for? He pulled Han Yunxi into his arms and hugged her tightly before letting go. As long as she did not regret it, it was enough. What kind of mess could he not clean up after her? Now that Gu Beiwei had returned, even Bai Yanqing could not stir up the world that he was determined to conquer. Long Fei Yi said, "We don't need the truth. We just need an opportunity to cooperate. The world is full of people, and everyone has their own opinions about what is right and wrong. Even if Bai Yanqing shows up and exposes everything we did today, so what? Not everyone in the world would believe what he said." After Long Fei Yi finished speaking, he turned around and instructed the Shadow Guard, "Pass down the order. Spread the news that Bai Yanqing escaped by faking his death after being stabbed in the heart." As soon as Long Fei Yi said this, Gu Beiwei, who had been tense all this time, suddenly relaxed and smiled. In the end, he was still inferior to Long Fei when it came to scheming. Long Fei Yi's preemptive strike had caught Bai Yanqing off guard. If they waited until Bai Yanqing showed up to explain everything that had happened today, the world would definitely not believe them. However, if they made the first move and released the news that Bai Yanqing had faked his death, the public would still support them more when Bai Yanqing appeared again. Moreover, Long Fei's declaration of the sword in the heart won't die would probably shake all of Cloud Realm continent. Bai Yanqing's background as a descendant of the poison sect would definitely make the world think of the legendary poison goo humans. The poison sect was already viewed as a public enemy when they researched the secret recipes for poison goo humans, much less Bai Yanqing. No matter whether he was really a poison goo human or not, the world would dread him and view him as an enemy. No one would believe him so easily. Han Yunxi's heart also settled back into her chest. She had to admit that Long Fei Yi's move was ruthless and ruthless. She could already imagine how much Cloud Realm continent would stir up once the news got out. As the poison sect's sect head, she had to fan the flames a bit. Send orders to the poison sect to remove Bai Yanqing from the list of direct descendants, Han Yunxi instructed. The guard hesitated before asking, "Princess, that's all? That's all. There's no need to say anything else. Leave it to the world to guess." Han Yunxi's gloomy mood suddenly brightened. Now it looked like she didn't need to bear the crime of patricide. Bai Yanqing and she were both direct descendants of the poison sect, so naturally there would be people who would suspect their relationship. If she used her status as sect head to remove Bai Yanqing's name now, she could prevent Bai Yanqing's notoriety from affecting the poison sect that had just been rehabilitated. Secondly, if Bai Yanqing came to acknowledge his daughter, she could interrogate him properly. If necessary, she didn't mind placing righteousness before family and cutting ties with Bai Yanqing in front of the world. "Your Highness, Princess, the most important thing right now is to stabilize the D clan and find a way to neutralize the poison goo humans. Since there's a secret art to nurture them, there must be a secret art to neutralize it," Gu Beiwei said seriously. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi both agreed on these points. After weighing the pros and cons, finding a way to neutralize the poison goo humans was even more urgent than stabilizing the D clan. Before, they hadn't known that Bai Yanqing was a poison goo human, so they hadn't sensed the threat. Now that they knew the truth, they still felt lingering fear. In truth, even if they joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing must have hidden his true strength because he had his own misgivings and didn't want to become public enemy number one. Everyone in this world yearned to be immortal and live forever. But who wouldn't be afraid when an unkillable monster like that appeared? Who wouldn't want to destroy such a monster? Even the major factions would do everything in their power to destroy it if they couldn't control it. A monster like this not only threatened the safety of the common people, but also the rule of the various major factions. As for the D clan, let's have Kingan Private Bank put some pressure on them first, Long Fei Yi said. Although the myriad merchant hall elders didn't know that Kingan Private Bank belonged to Long Fei Yi's faction, they all knew that it had close ties with Han Yunxi. As long as Kingan Private Bank put pressure on the auction houses, the myriad merchant hall elders would understand that Han Yunxi was planning to make a move against the D clan's treasury. They only had two choices: help Han Yunqi convince Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the Ning clan troops, or join forces with the Consortium and the Ning clan troops to resist Han Yunqi. There were many factions within the D clan as well. If they wanted to control them, they had to sound them out first before making any plans. All right, Han Yunqi nodded. She wanted to test the strength of the D clan's support for peace. There is still no news of Ning Cheng being kidnapped by Yu Qiao. If Ning Cheng was here, things would be much simpler. The most direct and effective way to control the D clan was through Ning Cheng. Actually, she didn't have such a strong desire for control. Instead, she hoped that Ning Cheng could set aside his years of obsession and join forces with Long Fei Yi to deal with the Wind clan. Back then, Ning Cheng had abandoned commerce for the army and started as a small soldier. It hadn't been easy for him to build such a large army. The D clan was a family of merchants who had been doing business for generations. What they needed most was peace and prosperity. Han Yunqi had always thought that if Ning Cheng hadn't joined the army and the D clan hadn't put so much thought into military affairs, perhaps King On Private Bank wouldn't be Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's biggest bank today. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's businesses wouldn't have been destroyed so easily by Long Fei Yi either. The fatal flaw of the Ning clan troops was that Ning Cheng had been getting very little money from the national treasury over the years. He was using Cloud Realm Trade Consortium to support the Ning clan troops. As long as Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's finances were in trouble, the entire D clan would be in trouble as well. Although Long Fei was a rich man, the Bailey Navy had been raised by the Tianning Imperial Court. Moreover, they'd continued to do so until Tianning fell into civil strife, and Emperor Tianhui fell from power. Meanwhile, Long Fei rarely supported the troops in the south with their salaries. Most of them were raised by the powerful families and financial groups of the south. Long Fei Yi had the ability to balance out the checks and balances between the aristocratic families and financial groups, so he didn't have to submit to anyone's whims. Even if the Bailey army was dissatisfied with Long Fei Yi, the aristocratic families and financial groups of the South would still support Long Fei Yi. The only problem between the aristocratic families and Long Fei Yi now lay with her. Still, it wasn't to the point of falling out. Last time, when she'd met with difficulties at the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, the aristocratic family heads had only targeted her. They didn't dare to touch Long Fei Yi. The southern families and financial groups simply wanted to marry off their daughters to Long Fei Yi, but that was still a long way off. At the very least, they still had to rely on Long Fei Yi to conquer the world and rely on the Long Fei Yi to provide them with all sorts of favorable conditions. They didn't dare to challenge Long Fei Yi yet. If the Bailey army rebelled, Long Fei Yi still had the southern armies. The Bai clan would cling to the grudges between eastern and western Qin, but the aristocratic families and financial groups of the south wouldn't. What they wanted was tangible benefits. Compared to Long Fei Yi, Ning Cheng lost because he didn't spread out the risks. The D clan had succeeded because of wealth, so it was likely that they'd lose because of it too. They didn't even need to use a single soldier to keep the D clan in check. All they needed to do was keep Myriad Merchant Hall in check. They'd probe the D clan first while putting the poison goo humans at the top of their list. But that wasn't an easy task. How were they supposed to understand a monster like that? Let's take a trip to the poison sect's forbidden grounds, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Han Yunqi thought for a moment before she suddenly exclaimed, "The poison sect's sacrificial altar, the wordless steel." Back in the poison sect's forbidden grounds, she'd accidentally stumbled upon the poison sect's sacrificial altar and seen an ancient and mysterious wordless steel. Later on, she'd dreamed of that place. In her dreams, she'd seen words appear on the steel, which recorded the cultivation methods of the poison storage space. But there were so many words that she couldn't read them all. She only remembered that there were 3 levels to the poison storage space and how to cultivate them. Would there be an introduction to the poison goo humans on the steel? Or perhaps some other secret of the poison sect? Or perhaps they could find some clues from the sacrificial altar? Han Yunqi didn't believe that Bai Yanqing had created the poison goo human secret on his own. He must have discovered something in the poisoned sect's forbidden grounds and obtained some sort of inheritance. Han Yunxi told Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei about this. Long Fei Yi immediately decided, "We'll head to the poisoned sect's forbidden grounds immediately." Gu Beiwei nodded. It was about time for him to make a trip back to Medical City. "I'm afraid the little thing is still with Bai Yanqing," Han Yunxi sighed. It would have been better if she hadn't brought it up, but now that she did, she missed the little fellow dearly. Gu Beiyue's gaze softened. He missed it too. That day, Han Yunxi met with Shi Jiuxia and arranged for a few poison guards and mercenaries to be stationed at 100 Poison Sect. At the same time, she inquired about Bai Yuqiao's whereabouts. Shi Jiuxia had received Bai Yuqiao's letter, but it didn't reveal her whereabouts. Han Yunxi gave Shi Jiuxia a year's time to reform 100 Poison Sect and give up on the trade of poisons. She told him to think of a way out for 100 Poisons Sect himself. She also said that if 100 Poison Sect didn't turn over a new leaf after a year, she would disband it. After settling matters with 100 Poison Sect, Han Yunxi and the others set off from Medical City in secret. Before Long Fei Yi boarded the carriage, he gave them 3 secret orders. Chapter 962. Long Fei Ye's 3 secret orders were as follows. Warn Gu that he would suffer the consequences if he didn't come to see him. Order Bailey Mingxiang to change their route and wait in Medical City. Keep a close eye on all the routes from 100 Poison Sect to Northern Li, in case Bai Yanqing went north to seek refuge with Jun Yixia. Medical City was northeast of 100 Poison Sect, and was where 100 Poison Sect would pass on their way to the land of 3 roads. Long Fei Yi had been very cautious this time. Bai Yanqing had an undying body. If he wanted to take revenge, Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to deal with him, no matter how strong his martial arts were. Thus, Long Fei Yi eliminated 5 teams of Shadow Guard and disguised them as 100 Poison Sect members, heading in different directions. Meanwhile, he, Han Yunxi, and Gu Beiwei only took a few poison guards with them. They entered the deep mountains and forests of Western Zhou's eastern region and secretly headed for the Poison Sect. At the very least, their mission at 100 Poison Sect had been a success. Disregarding everything else, discovering Bai Yanqing's undying body was their greatest reward. It was hard to imagine what would have happened if they hadn't known about Bai Yanqing's secret. Bai Yanqing must have never imagined that Long Fei Yi would purposely go down the abyss after kicking his corpse into it. At this very moment, Bai Yanqing was heading west. He had no intention of going to Northern Li to seek refuge with Jun Yixia. West. Where was he going? Only he himself knew. After Long Fei Ye's group left, news that Bai Yanqing was a poison goo human spread quickly. Emperor Kong Chung and Long Tianma were still in Great Central County when they heard the news. Even Mu Qingwu was scared out of his wits, to say nothing of the 2 of them. Poison goo human? How is that possible? Emperor Kong Chung had been restless all afternoon. Long Tianma was silent, but his expression wasn't any better. Long Tianma didn't say anything. As a subordinate, Mu Qingwu couldn't be too unruly in front of outsiders. He was also silent. Emperor Kong Chung had just sat down when he stood up again. Could this be a scheme by Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi? Tell me, how is this possible? Wasn't the Poison Sect destroyed by Medical City back then? They have no reason to make up such a rumor, Long Tianma said lightly. What are you afraid of? Bai Yanqing has no enmity with you or me. Even if the sky collapses, we still have Eastern, Western Qin, and Northern Li to support us. Emperor Kong Chung disagreed with Long Tianma's opinion. You can't say that. If Bai Yanqing really is a poison goo human, then wouldn't the world be his sooner or later? A poison corpse was enough to fight against dozens of soldiers. Wouldn't a poison goo human be even more so? If Eastern, Western Qin, and Northern Li are destroyed, we won't be able to protect them either. Let's just wait and see. In truth, Long Tianma was also somewhat apprehensive. At this point, he no longer had much ambition. He only wanted to protect his little piece of land in Tianan, avoid war, and live in a corner. He'd only recently discovered that General Mu's ambitions weren't small. However, he still didn't understand why General Mu wanted to make such a big deal out of Hunter Poison's sect. This morning, Emperor Kong Chung had probed him many times, but he'd only brushed him off half-heartedly. In the end, Emperor Kong Chung hadn't brought up the matter until news of the poison goo human arrived. "It's getting late. We must take our leave." Long Tianma rose to his feet. Emperor Kong Chung didn't linger. After saying a few words of farewell, he walked Long Tianma to his residence. Long Tianma was about to board his carriage when he suddenly remembered something. He smiled. "Since Western Zhou and Tian are going to advance and retreat together, why don't we continue our marriage ties?" Emperor Kong Chung was overjoyed. Long Tianma only had one empress and no children. When he said marriage ties, he meant that he wanted Western Zhou's princess to be married off to Tian and excellent. Excellent. Emperor Kong Chung nodded with a smile. Having a princess in Tian and would serve as an informant. At the same time, it would strengthen the relationship between the two countries. Western Zhou's emperor used to be full of ambition, but after experiencing so many battles, especially against the imperial clans of Eastern and Western Qin, he'd long since retreated. His thoughts are the same as Long Tianma's. He wanted to live in seclusion and have the country prosper. Western Zhou and Tian were separated by the forces of Eastern and Western Qin. Neither Western Zhou nor Tian could surpass the forces of Eastern and Western Qin and face them head-on. Since there was no direct conflict between the two countries, marriage ties were the best way to stabilize their relationship. Western Zhou's princess married off to Tian and wouldn't be ostracized or guarded against. Emperor Kong Chung wasn't an easy person to deal with. He'd inquired about the situation of Tian's empress, Mu Luiyue. Now that he heard Long Tianma's suggestion, he could more or less sniff out the secret struggle between Long Tianma and General Mu's estate. He was certain that Western Zhou's princess would be favored by Tianan. She might even give birth to Tian's first heir. Emperor Kong Chung immediately agreed and promised to marry Western Zhou's princess, He to Long Tianma, as his consort. Princess Dehi's full name was Duanmu Jin. She had just turned 16 and was the daughter of an imperial concubine. She was the youngest princess of Western Zhou and the daughter Emperor Kong Chung doted on the most after Duanmu Yao. A few years ago, Emperor Kong Chung had been waiting for Duanmu Jin to come of age so that he could marry her off to Chu Tianyin to keep the Chu clan in check. He hadn't expected the Chu clan to rebel so quickly. It was rumored that before Duanmu Yao was expelled from the imperial clan, she'd suppressed Duanmu Jin quite a bit. Now that Duanmu Yao and the empress were both in trouble, the little princess had become Emperor Kong Cheng's favorite. Long Tianma didn't know who Duanmu Jin was, much less what she looked like. He didn't care about any of that. When he returned to the palace this time, he was going to face the selection of consorts. He needed a noble consort who could suppress Mu Luiyue. Since General Mu wanted to cooperate with Western Zhou, a Western Zhou princess was the perfect candidate. Long Tianma and Emperor Kong Cheng's meeting went smoothly. Both of them were delighted and exchanged a few more words in low voices before parting. Mu Qingwu stood behind Long Tianma. His heart was heavy as he listened to the marriage proposal. Luiyue had already caused quite a ruckus in the palace because of the selection. He didn't even dare to report it. If news of the marriage proposal got back, heaven knows what kind of chaos would ensue in Tianan's harem. Mu Qingwu suddenly didn't want to go back, but he had to escort Long Tianma back and ask his father about certain things. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi left, as did Emperor Kong Chung and Long Tianma. Everyone else left as well. In less than 3 days, news of Bai Yanqing being a poison goo human spread throughout Cloud Realm continent, leaving everyone in a state of panic. Many of the great clans wrote a joint letter requesting a clear explanation from Medical City. The Medical Academy and the Poison Sect issued a joint statement admitting to the matter and expelling Bai Yanqing from the Poison Sect. Jun Yixie soon learned of the news as well. The secret missive in his hand fell to the ground as he fell to his knees. His master had chosen to return to the 100 Poison Sect instead of coming to Sky River to find him, which was already a disappointment. He never expected Bai Yanqing to tell him the truth about the Great Qin Empire. or that Bai Yanqing had already turned him into a poison goo human. He had studied poisons with Bai Yanqing and asked him more than once about the poison sex, poison goo human secret arts. Every time, Bai Yanqing's reply was, "I don't know." Just what was Bai Yanqing planning to do by hiding it so deeply? He'd called Bai Yanqing master for so many years, but Bai Yanqing had no feelings for him at all. Poison goo human. What a poison goo human. Very good, very good. As he muttered to himself, he suddenly raised his head and roared, "Bai Yanqing, you lied to me." The resentment in his heart finally exploded. Jun Yixie was so angry that his eyes turned red. "Bai Yanqing, my black clan will break all ties with you. We're irreconcilable." Jun Yixie spent an entire night calming himself down and convincing himself to forget about their master and disciple relationship. No matter what Bai Yanqing wanted to do, they would be enemies if they ever met again. At daybreak, Jun Yixie went to find Ning Cheng. After all, he had more important matters to attend to. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had reconciled, but how could Eastern and Western Qin still be allies? It was as if they had become a family. He liked to ask Ning Cheng what he thought of the matter. When Long Tianma came over, Ning Cheng had just woken up. There were wine jars all over the floor, and the air was still filled with the smell of alcohol. Of course, those wine jars were military wine and not the ones Bai Yuqiao bought. "What's the matter? Trying to drown your sorrows with alcohol?" Jun Yixie asked sarcastically. "You, the princess of Western Qin, can finally be together with Long Fei Yi. Ning Cheng, you're done for." Ning Cheng raised his head and looked at him. He was drunk and despondent. He sneered, Haven't I been done for a long time?" Jun Yixie suddenly grabbed him by the collar and said angrily, "Ning Cheng, you said that the world is mine and Han Yunxi is yours. You better get your act together. You want 30,000 war horses, right? I'll give them to you right now." Ning Cheng's dejected eyes flashed, but he still pretended to be dispirited. He pulled Jun Yixie's hand away, turned around, and fell from the warm couch to the ground. He pointed at Jun Yixie and laughed drunkenly. "Okay, it's settled then. The world is Long Fei Ye's and Han Yunxi's. Han Yunxi's and Long Fei Ye's. Long Fei Ye's." Jun Yixie was already furious. When he heard this, he became even angrier. He brought a basin of cold water and poured it on Ning Cheng's head without hesitation. Then he smashed the metal plate on his face. "Ning Cheng, wake up. Wake up right now." Ning Cheng rubbed his temples, looking as if he had just woken up. He glanced at Jun Yixie and walked out without saying a word. "Stop right there," Jun Yixie said coldly. Ning Cheng kept walking forward. These days, he and Jun Yixie were in a deadlock. Jun Yixie didn't give him any war horses, and he didn't give Jun Yixie any military pay. "Ning Cheng, write a letter to Myriad Merchant Hall immediately and have the Ning clan army prepare. I'll give you the 30,000 war horses of Sky River City," Jun Yixie said generously. Jun Yixie had just said these words. Ning Cheng had been putting on an act all this time to completely dispel his doubts. Jun Yixie didn't immediately bring up the matter of military pay. In other words, Jun Yixie had accepted his previous condition. He would only provide military pay if the war horses were successfully controlled by the Ning clan army. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. Okay, Ning Cheng didn't look back, nor was he happy. Instead, he had a complicated expression. He hadn't been drunk last night. Instead, he had been thinking all night about who he should write to in the D clan. This letter was very difficult to write. Jun Yixie would definitely keep an eye on it. He pondered for a while and finally thought of someone. This person was... Chapter 963. The person Ning Cheng was thinking of was none other than Myriad Merchant Hall's fifth elder. Unlike the other elders, fifth elder was absolutely loyal and obedient to Western Qin's imperial clan. Ning Cheng couldn't guarantee what the letter would do once it reached fifth elder's hands, but he believed it would be better in his hands than in anyone else's. At the very least, fifth elder wouldn't be too rash and impulsive. That way, they could buy some more time. As long as by Yu Qiao's banknotes reached Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders, everything would be easy to handle. Under Jun Yixie's watchful gaze, Ning Cheng quickly picked up his brush. Every word of the letter was difficult to write. Under Jun Yixie's scrutiny, he couldn't reveal the truth of his imprisonment here, nor could he order the D clan to remain loyal to Western Qin and fully cooperate with Han Yunxi. At the same time, he had to create a false impression for Jun Yixie to see, so that Jun Yixie would believe he wanted to pit the D clan against Han Yunxi and Long Fei. The three main powers of the D clan, Myriad Merchant Hall, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, and the military, were all under his control. He knew the Council of Elders and his deputy generals very well. Leaving aside the fact that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had killed Bai Yanqing first, then cleared up the misunderstanding between Eastern and Western Qin, it wasn't entirely convincing. Even if Bai Yanqing claimed in front of the world that the Wind and Black clans were the ones who instigated the civil war in the Great Qin Empire, none of the D clan elders would believe him. They wouldn't want to. They were just as stubborn when it came to vengeance as he was. In truth, if he had not heard Jun Yixie tell him the truth, he would not have believed Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's suspicions about the civil war in Great Qin. Moreover, these old men were all senior members of the D clan. Their loyalty to the D clan was far greater than their loyalty to the Western Qin royal family. They more or less had their own selfish motives. They hoped that the D clan could become a great contributor to the restoration of the Western Qin Empire. They hoped that the D clan could become the most powerful force in the Western Qin Empire. They even hoped that the D clan could marry into the royal family in order to preserve their status and power. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi have reconciled in public. The D clan's Elders Association must be worried that the D clan will be reduced to Long Fei Yi's subordinates. In any case, they must rebel. Under such circumstances, if Myriad Merchant Hall hadn't received his banknotes, they wouldn't know the truth. Then, once Jun Yixie's 30,000 warhorses fell into their hands, they would definitely throw caution to the wind and start a war without caring about the consequences. Ning Cheng held the brush. After thinking for a while, he wrote a line of words. Receive 30,000 warhorses from the Milky Way. Wait for orders. Prepare 500 million soldiers. Pay at Prosperous Heaven Bank, Northernly Branch. Wait for orders. This was the leeway Ning Cheng left for himself and the D clan. It was also his greatest effort for Han Yunxi's sake. The matter of the soldiers' pay was to put Jun Yixie's mind at ease. Even if 500 million soldiers' pay was sent to Prosperous Heaven Bank's Northernly Branch, no one would be able to claim it without his appearance. 500 million? Jun Yixie asked with a raised brow. They had agreed on 1 billion. Once the warhorses arrive, pay 500 million up front. It's enough for you. Our cooperation won't be short. Why are you in such a hurry? Ning Cheng asked in return. Indeed, 500 million was enough for Jun Yixie to turn things around. It wasn't easy to see Ning Cheng use the soldiers' pay, so he didn't ask for more. Ning Cheng put the letter into an envelope. The recipient was Ning Cheng, and he decisively wrote Fifth Elder. Jun Yixie took the letter away, leaving behind a sentence. I'll wait for your soldiers' pay. Seeing Jun Yixie walk away, Ning Cheng wiped his face a few times with both hands to wake himself up. Reconcile, he chuckled and muttered to himself. Han Yunxi, whether you and I are friends or foes will depend on heaven's will. If his banknotes reached the D clan before the warhorses, he could be considered to have truly joined forces with Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. If the warhorses reached the D clan before the banknotes, once the D clan rebelled, he would never be able to clear his name. Ning Cheng stood at the door for a while. Bai Yuqiao hurriedly ran over. Ning Cheng, quickly follow me to the prison cell. Hurry. Bai Yuqiao was burning with anxiety. Ning Cheng lazily glanced at her and turned to enter the room. Bai Yuqiao grabbed him. Someone's about to die. Ning Cheng's eyes turned cold. He was about to push him away when Bai Yuqiao said, Su Xiaoyu's about to die. You should go and persuade her. Who knows? You might be able to persuade her. Su Xiaoyu? Ning Cheng was shocked. but he still pushed Bai Yuqiao's hand away. Ning Cheng was still on guard, wondering if this was a trap. Jun Yixia and Bai Yuqiao teamed up to test him. Unexpectedly, Bai Yuqiao said, Ning Cheng, Su Xiaoyu is Han Yunxi's most beloved maidservant. If you want to save her life, Han Yunxi will definitely be grateful to you. Han Yunxi will have a good impression of you. You should quickly go and persuade her. She won't even drink her medicine. With Bai Yuqiao's reason, Ning Cheng naturally strode over. Bai Yuqiao immediately followed and briefly explained the situation to Ning Cheng. In summary, Su Xiaoyu was sick. She hadn't taken her medicine, and now her life was in danger. When they reached the prison cell door, Bai Yuqiao stopped and said, I won't go in. You go in yourself. You can lie to her or coax her, but she will at least believe you. Ning Cheng walked into the prison cell. When he saw Su Xiaoyu, he couldn't help but gasp. Su Xiaoyu was no longer hanging on the torture rack, but placed on the stone bed. Her clothes were torn and her hair was disheveled. Her originally thin body was now completely skin and bones. Her eyes were tightly shut and her hands were tightly clenched into fists. Even though she was terminally ill, her entire body was still tense. It wasn't clear whether she was nervous or on guard. Her palm-sized face was so pale that it didn't have a trace of blood, but her expression was still stubborn and unyielding. Even someone as heartless as Ning Cheng felt his heart ache when he saw her. He thought that if that woman, Han Yunxi, saw this child like this, her heart would definitely ache. Ning Cheng suddenly realized that in the huge Sky River horse farm, there were so many people, but only this little girl was on the same side as him. Was it because she didn't want to reveal anything and didn't want to become a hostage? So, she wanted to die. If there came a day when he couldn't do his best and could only be manipulated by Jun Yixia, would Su Xiaoyu's current situation be his tomorrow? After Ning Cheng confirmed that there was no one around, he bent down. He had never been so gentle in his life. He carefully lifted the hair covering Su Xiaoyu's face and whispered, "Little girl, accompany me for a while. If we die, Big Brother will die with you." Su Xiaoyu didn't move, but Ning Cheng clearly noticed that her long eyelashes were trembling. He lowered his voice. "My name is Ning Cheng, the leader of the D clan." When he said this, Su Xiaoyu immediately opened her eyes. Although she was kidnapped all the way to Sky River City, she didn't have the chance to meet Ning Cheng. But she knew that Ning Cheng was kidnapped like her. Previously in the Black Tower, she also heard the Shadow Guard talk about Ning Cheng. This guy was a loyal follower of the Western Qin royal family, but also an enemy of Long Fei Yi. "Little, don't call yourself Big Brother. I don't know you." Even if she was so weak that she only had one breath left, Su Xiaoyu's mouth was still so stubborn and sharp. Ning Cheng smiled. "At least you're willing to talk to me." Su Xiaoyu quickly noticed Ning Cheng's phoenix feather mask. She only felt that the pattern was very familiar, but she couldn't tell where she had seen it. This is phoenix feather? Even speaking was very laborious. She had seen phoenix feather a long time ago. When Chu Tianyin asked her to infiltrate Han Yunxi's side to see if Han Yunxi had a phoenix feather birthmark, he had given her the pattern. Of course, Su Xiaoyu didn't remember these things, but she knew that the Western Qin princess had a phoenix feather birthmark on her back. "Yes," Ning Cheng admitted. "Your eyes. What happened?" Su Xiaoyu asked. "I saw something I shouldn't have, so I went blind." Ning Cheng actually laughed. Su Xiaoyu was confused, but she didn't have the strength to pursue the matter. She asked, They sent you?" Ning Cheng couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This girl was really mature and smart. Compared to those adult servant girls, she was several times better. "Yes, they sent me to persuade you to take the medicine," Ning Cheng admitted again. Su Xiaoyu laughed. In fact, she didn't have the strength to laugh, but her expression was smiling. She asked, "You? Based on what?" Ning Cheng didn't shy away from answering loudly. "Based on the fact that I like your mistress." He suddenly leaned over to Su Xiaoyu's ear and whispered, "Live for another month. If I can't save you, I'll die with you." After Ning Cheng finished speaking, he immediately retreated and stood up. Su Xiaoyu only then realized how tall and imposing this man was. She looked at him and actually nodded without anyone noticing. 1 month, no harm. After Ning Chung came out, Bai Yuqiao hurriedly asked, "How was it?" I coaxed her that I would save her and curry favor with Han Yunqi. She believed me. Ning Chung said indifferently. When he was about to leave, he stopped and said, "Remember to give her to me when you're done with the interrogation. Han Yunqi will definitely like such a gift." It had to be said that Ning Cheng's acting was very good. Bai Yuqiao didn't think too much about it. He instructed the soldiers to boil the medicine and personally brought the nurse in to perform the acupuncture. Su Xiaoyu's eyes were wide open and she didn't move. Bai Yuqiao didn't say much to her and just stood at the side and watched. After the nurse took her pulse, she asked Su Xiaoyu to take off her clothes and lay on the stone bed. Su Xiaoyu was so weak that she didn't even have the strength to raise her hand. She didn't move at all. There weren't many maidservants in the army, especially in this place. Bai Yuqiao could only do it himself. She nimbly took off her clothes and flipped her body over. However, she was stunned when she flipped her body over. The nurse began to perform acupuncture on Su Xiaoyu's back. Su Xiaoyu had already closed her eyes. With just a slight movement, she felt that all her strength had been sucked away. She really wanted to sleep. The nurse quickly realized that something was wrong and cried out in alarm, "Not good." The nurse hurriedly turned Su Xiaoyu over and desperately pinched her philtrum point. "Child, you can't sleep. You can't sleep. Child, wake up." Bai Yuqiao regained her senses and suddenly panicked. What's wrong with her? If she continues to sleep, she will never wake up. Is the medicine ready? If not, bring some sweet soup over first. Hurry. The nurse was extremely anxious. She repeatedly pinched Su Xiaoyu's philtrum a few times and checked her eyelids. This kind of emergency treatment wasn't actually the first time, but this time, Bai Yuqiao's entire face was pale. She stood in the same place, not knowing what to do. Her bean-sized eyes kept rolling down. What's wrong with her? Chapter 964. The female doctor was trying to save Su Xiaoyu, but Bai Yuqiao had lost her usual ability and agility as she moved like the wind. She stood by the side at a loss as bean-sized teardrops kept falling down, and unknowingly, she had already cried till she was in a complete mess. Not knowing how long had passed, the female doctor once again pulled Su Xiaoyu back from the brink of death. Actually, this round Su Xiaoyu was in an extremely dangerous situation, but luckily, she didn't resist like the previous few times, but was much more obedient. Otherwise, she really wouldn't be able to be saved. After ascertaining that Su Xiaoyu's life wasn't in any danger, the female doctor then looked towards Bai Yuqiao and was shocked to discover that Bai Yuqiao was in tears. "Young Miss Bai, what's wrong?" the female doctor asked timidly. Bai Yuqiao seemed to have gone crazy as she grabbed the female doctor's collar and questioned, "Is she all right? I'm telling you, if anything happens to her, you can forget about living." The female doctor was scared and aggrieved. "Young Miss Bai, how is she? Tell me." Bai Yuqiao roared angrily. She's not. Her life is no longer in danger, but her illness is still very, very serious, and her body is also very weak. She needs to be treated slowly nurtured. The female doctor's voice was trembling. She had been in contact with Bai Yuqiao for so long, but she had never seen Bai Yuqiao in such a state, as though she had lost her mind. "Then why are you still in a daze for? Hurry up and treat her." Bai Yuqiao pushed the female doctor aside as she looked left and right in a fluster, not daring to look at Su Xiaoyu. After some time, she then said, This lass is very important. She must be treated well and nurtured well. Whatever medicinal herbs you need, just tell me." After Bai Yuqiao said that, she ran towards the door, and it was until she saw a group of patrolling soldiers walking past the door when she abruptly stopped in her tracks and turned her back to them. It was only then that she calmed down a little. She wiped away the tears on her face and carefully walked into the prison cell. She did not disturb the female doctor. She stood in the dark and quietly watched the female doctor perform acupuncture on Su Xiaoyu. She really wanted to walk over and take a closer look at the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back, but she didn't dare to. She was brought back by her master from the City of Daughters. She didn't know who her parents were, but she had a younger sister. Other than this, her master didn't tell her anything else. However, she had long been secretly investigating this matter. She had searched through the entire 100 Poisons sect and the entire Great Central County before finally finding the granny who had raised her all those years ago. It was a pity that the nanny didn't know much. The granny said that she had a jade rui tattoo on her back, but it was incomplete, only half of it. The granny speculated that if she had a younger sister, then the other half of the jade rui tattoo should be on her younger sister's back. That year, Bai Yanqing had asked the granny to casually give her a name. Because the granny saw the jade rui tattoo, she gave it the word Yu. Because the granny's surname was Qiao, she gave her the name Bai Yu Qiao. Just now, she saw a jade rui tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back. It was only half of it, but could be pieced together with the one on her back to form a complete jade rui. When a person was young, the tattoo would change shape as they grew up. The jade rui tattoo on her back had already changed shape, but the shape could still be seen. And the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back had also changed shape. The degree of change was almost the same as the one on her back. This proved that the tattoo on Su Xiaoyu's back was also tattooed when she was young. Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu, Bai Yu Qiao muttered to herself. Su Xiaoyu's name also had the word Yu in it. Who gave her this name? Was it also because of the tattoo on her back? In 100 Poisons sect and this army, some of the elders who were familiar with her all called her Yuer. Han Yunxi and the others all called Su Xiaoyu Little Yuer. She was Big Yuer, and Su Xiaoyu was Little Yuer. Thinking of this, Bai Yu Qiao couldn't control her tears from flowing out. Behind her master's back, she had searched for her biological younger sister for so many years. Her only family in this world had actually been by her side for a long time, but she had been tortured by her for so long. She had been sick, injured, and had almost died on the rack several times. Why was it like this? Since she was young, she had always been clear-minded. She had long seen that her master didn't truly love her, and her senior brother didn't treat her with sincerity. She had lived alone in this world, and had never known what it felt like to have a family member. Now that she had won, why did her heart ache so much? Why was she so afraid? She was finally no longer lonely. She finally had someone she could hug. So shouldn't she be happy? Why did her tears keep falling? Why did she want to wail so much? Bai Yu Qiao cried silently, wiping away her tears as she propped herself up and stood upright. After the female physician finished the acupuncture, she wrote a prescription and waited for the servant girl to bring the decocted medicine over. She stayed by Su Xiaoyu's side until she regained consciousness and fed her a bowl of medicine. After everything was settled, the female physician then walked towards Bai Yu Qiao. Seeing Bai Yu Qiao's head lowered and her entire person dimmed, the female physician didn't dare to ask too much. She only said seriously, "Miss Bai, in another 6 hours I'll come over again to take her pulse and feed her medicine. If she wakes up during this period, the servant girl will feed her some millet porridge." Bai Yu Qiao lowered her head and didn't say a word. She only waved her hand to signal the female physician to leave. After the female physician left, the large prison cell became empty and quiet. Only Su Xiaoyu's frail and petite body laid there quietly, giving off an unreal feeling. Bai Yu Qiao leaned against the wall and slowly slid down, kneeling on the ground. She buried her face in her hands, and very quickly, her entire body started to tremble as she started to cry out. Gradually, the sound became louder and louder as it resounded in the dark and gloomy prison cell. It was extremely miserable. Su Xiaoyu slowly opened her eyes. In actual fact, she wasn't unconscious after being fed the medicine. She was just too tired and didn't want to move. She was afraid that Bai Yu Qiao would know that she wasn't unconscious and would come over to ask her what Ning Chang had said to her. Su Xiaoyu laid there and didn't dare to move. She looked at her surroundings, and in her limited vision, she didn't see Bai Yu Qiao, who was in the dark. She didn't recognize that such a miserable cry belonged to Bai Yu Qiao, and she didn't expect Bai Yu Qiao to cry in such a manner. She was extremely curious. Just who was crying here? Did something happen? In the end, She guessed that it was probably one of the maidservants who had been beaten and scolded by Yu Qiao and had been wronged. Just like that, Su Xiaoyu slowly closed her eyes again and gradually fell asleep amidst the cries of her biological sister. After Bai Yu Qiao calmed down, he didn't walk over to see Su Xiaoyu. Instead, he resolutely turned around and left. Based on her understanding of Jun Yixie, if Su Xiaoyu didn't tell him the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion, Jun Yixie definitely wouldn't let her go. And once Su Xiaoyu revealed the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion, she would die without a doubt. Jun Yixie was currently busy working with Ning Cheng. No matter what, she had to save Su Xiaoyu before Jun Yixie had the time to think about Su Xiaoyu. Jun Yixie was the man she had secretly loved for many years. She could give up everything for him, and she was willing to do it. However, she definitely wouldn't be soft-hearted about the matter of Su Xiaoyu, and she definitely wouldn't back down. This matter could only be hidden in her heart. It was enough for her to keep it to herself. Once it was leaked, perhaps even she wouldn't be able to escape this calamity, let alone save her. After exiting the prison, Bai Yu Qiao instructed in a low voice, "Find 2 more sensible maidservants to serve her. That girl is an important hostage. If anything happens to her, be careful of your heads." The soldiers could naturally see that Bai Yu Qiao was acting strangely, but they didn't dare to probe. They respectfully accepted the order and left. That night, Bai Yu Qiao sent his trusted aide to continue investigating Su Xiaoyu's past. Helian Zuixiang had said that Su Xiaoyu was a spy that Chu Tianyin had planted in the Duke of Qin's manor. After being exposed, she had lost her memories. She wanted to know how Chu Tianyin had found Su Xiaoyu and where Su Xiaoyu had grown up. Jun Yixie indeed didn't have time to pay attention to Su Xiaoyu's matters. In the past, he would ask a few questions, but recently, he had almost completely forgotten about them. He was busy arranging for the 30,000 warhorses to head south, and also busy urging the second batch of warhorses from Wintercrow country to reach Tiana City as soon as possible. Although he had promised to support the D clan's 30,000 warhorses, he wouldn't let go so easily. At this moment, he was secretly investigating with a few beast tamers from the Black Clan. These beast tamers were also the trainers of the 30,000 warhorses. Not only would they escort the warhorses to the south, but they would also stay in the army to assist the D clan's cavalry. Jun Yixie's warhorses were preparing to head south, but a group of people had already arrived at the outskirts of Tiana City and would soon arrive at his army. This group of people was Uncle Cheng and the others. In the dead of night, Uncle Cheng's group settled down at a rundown temple in the outskirts of Tiana City. Uncle Cheng and Jin Zizi both knew about what had happened at the 100 Poison sect. Mu Ling and Ning Jing only knew that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had joined forces to attack the 100 Poison sect, but they didn't know the results. In fact, they could have gone to Jun Yixie's army to look for Ning Cheng today, but Uncle Cheng was still very cautious. They decided to wait for a few days and find out more about the situation in Tiana City before taking action. The carriage stopped outside the temple. Deacon Jean lit a fire in the temple to keep warm. Outside, the north wind whistled. Northernly had already entered the cold season. Ning Jing was wrapped in a large fox fur robe. It kept her warm and also covered her slightly obvious belly. Some people's bellies were very obvious after 2 or 3 months of pregnancy. Some people's bellies only became obvious after 5 or 6 months. Fortunately, Ning Jing belonged to the latter. Coupled with her loose clothes, she really managed to hide it from everyone's eyes. At this time, she was kneeling on a shabby praying mat and praying to a broken Buddha statue. Uncle Cheng sat on a pile of straw to the side. He looked at the fire, his eyes somewhat out of focus. No one knew what he was plotting in his heart. Deacon Jean had just gone to hunt some game and cleaned it by a nearby stream. At this time, he was roasting it over the fire. Mu Ling was sat at the side and stared. The more she looked, the more hungry she became. She didn't even realize that Deacon Jean had been looking at her so many times. After roasting it, Deacon Jean first handed her a roasted quail. Mu Ling didn't even think about it and wanted to take it. who knew that Deacon Jean would pass it to Uncle Chung. He said to Mu Ling, you can't eat this kind of thing. Mu Ling finally realized that she was a pregnant woman. She rolled her eyes at Deacon Jean and got up to walk out of the door. Watch her, Uncle Chung immediately said. Deacon Jean chased after her and saw that Mu Ling hadn't gone far. She was sitting on the steps at the door. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down beside Mu Ling. Chapter 965. Deacon Jean sat down by Mu Ling side, but Mu Ling ignored him. She was wondering why Chi brother still hadn't found her after leaving so many secret signals on the road. Could it be that something had happened to Chi brother himself? If Chi brother returned to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, he'd definitely find out that she and Ning Jing had been kidnapped. He'd probably remember the secret signals she'd left him. Chi brother had disappeared without a trace after going to Black Tower that day. Just what had happened to him? Mu Ling creased her brows at the thought. Deacon Jean averted his eyes at the sight, unwilling to see her like this. But after a while, Deacon Jean finally spoke up. What are you vexed about? Mu Ling glanced at him before asking another question. Hey, you're Deacon Jean, right? Although Mu Ling asked again and again with certainty, Deacon Jean still refused to answer her. She didn't know when it started, but whenever Deacon Jean took the initiative to talk to Mu Ling Mu Ling wouldn't care what he said, but insisted on asking the same question. As usual, Manager Jean turned his head and looked elsewhere. Mu Ling was still worried about Ning Jing, so she glanced back to make sure the old man wasn't bothering Ning Jing before turning back again. Jean Z, we're not far from the Winter Crow clan, right? If I remember correctly, this should be Northern Li's Sky River City. Even now, she and Ning Jing had no idea where Deacon Jean wanted to take them. But as soon as they entered Northern Li's borders, they'd lost all hope. Deacon Jean didn't speak. Mu Linger asked again, can you do me a favor and tell me if the D clan has any news about Ningcheng? I'm not plotting anything. It's just that Ning Jing is worried about her brother. Deacon Jean remained silent. Mu Ling pulled a long face and got up to leave. She wouldn't sit with this guy if she couldn't get anything out of him. Unexpectedly, Deacon Jean suddenly spoke. You know about Winter Crow Kingdom? Mu Ling was slightly shocked and immediately sat back down. Are you really taking us to the Winter Crow Kingdom? It should be snowing in Winter Crow country by now. Deacon Jean sighed. Didn't you want to blackmail my sister and Chi brother? Let's discuss this. I have a way for you to extort more silver. Don't take us to Winter Crow Kingdom. I can't stand the weather there. Mu Ling was almost on the verge of tears. If they went to Winter Crow Kingdom, where birds didn't shit and chickens didn't lay eggs, she and Ning Jing would have no chance of survival. Deacon Jean ignored Mu Ling's nervousness and said mildly, Winter Crow Kingdom is covered in snow in winter. It's clean and holy. When spring comes next year, the snow and ice will melt and the grass will grow and the orioles will fly. It's very beautiful. Mu Ling glanced at Deacon Jean and saw that his face was full of longing for his hometown. She couldn't help but ask, have you been there before? No, I heard about it from the people there, Deacon Jean said mildly. He had been sold to the black market since he was young, so his impression of Winter Crow Kingdom was already vague. Winter Crow Kingdom produced horses and gemstones. Some fearless merchants would go to Winter Crow Kingdom to buy horses and gemstones at a low price and bring them back to the three-way black market to be auctioned. Gradually, some of the smarter clansmen in Winter Crow Kingdom would imitate this practice and bring the horses and gemstones out of Winter Crow Kingdom to be auctioned at the three-way black market. However, this kind of behavior was rare and could be counted on one's fingers in the past few years. This was because the Winter Crow Kingdom's chief had very strict control over the private sale of horses and gemstones. Jun Ixia was able to obtain so many war horses not as a private sale, but as a member of the Northernly royal family. He had also put in a lot of effort. You really want to go, right? Mu Ling probed carefully. Deacon Ji nodded. Mu Ling heart trembled. She continued to ask, we will be there soon, right? Deacon Jean was about to nod when he realized that something was wrong. He didn't know why, but he suddenly chuckled. Mu Ling knew that her probing had failed. She lowered her head, feeling very helpless. Deacon Jean looked at her for a long time, and for the first time, he told her the truth. We're not going to East Wu. We're going to meet someone. Mu Ling looked up abruptly. Who? You'll know in a few days. Deacon Jean stopped here. Mu Ling was very suspicious. If they would know in a few days, it meant that the person they were meeting was near Sky River City. She didn't understand the situation in Northern Li and couldn't figure out the reason. She thought that she would secretly tell Ning Jing later, when Deacon Jean and the old man were asleep. With Ning Jing's intelligence, she would definitely be able to name a few suspects. Jean Z, will you go back to Wintercrow Kingdom in the future? Mu Ling continued probing. Mu Ling treated this conversation as a test, but she didn't know what Deacon Jin's purpose was. Yes, he gave a very definite answer. Jean Z, do you have a home in Wintercrow Kingdom? Mu Ling asked again. Deacon Jean shook his head. I don't know. He only knew that he was a slave and nothing else. In fact, Mu Ling still sympathized with Deacon Jean and Ning Cheng when they worked together to trap her and Chi brother. She even planned to return his gold card. Is your surname really Jean? Why is her name Jean Z? Mu Ling asked again. Deacon Jean was silent for a while, but he still answered. He said, I'm a slave. I only have a serial number, but no name. Serial number? Mu Ling was very curious. She really didn't know much about slaves. The slaves in the slave market don't have names. There are 10 slaves in each cage, and they are numbered from 1 to 10. They will only be given a name when they are sold to the new owner, Deacon Jean explained. What's your serial number? Mu Ling asked casually. 7, Deacon Jean said lightly. Because of Chi brother, Mu Ling had a particularly good impression of this number. She muttered to herself, Xiao Qi. Deacon Jean had only heard of Gu's name, but didn't know much about him. For a moment, he didn't realize that the Xiao Qi Mu Ling was talking about was Gu. He just thought that Mu Ling was talking about him. He was a little embarrassed and looked away. Mu Ling suddenly missed Chi brother, and her entire being became sorrowful. She didn't ask any further. However, Deacon Jean continued, on the day Myriad Merchant Hall bought me, I bumped into Ning Cheng. He asked me what I wanted, and I said gold. He then rewarded me with the name Gold. Gold. He needed a lot of gold to redeem himself. In this lifetime, he lived for this one thing. Mu Ling turned to look at Deacon Jean. Her heart felt strangely stifled. Even she found it strange. What did this guy's matters have to do with her? She didn't pity him. If she pitied him, who would pity her? Gold, I'll ask you one last time. Will you cooperate with me? I swear on my life that as long as you send me and Ning Jing back to Myriad Merchant Hall, I promise my big sis will return the indenture agreement to you and help you pay off all your debts. Mu Ling said seriously. Deacon Jean gave her a meaningful look before giving a cold smile. He rose to leave as if nothing had happened. After the battle, 100 Poison sect, Han Yunxi would soon face the D clan's condemnation. Han Yunxi could no longer control Myriad Merchant Hall. He had already made up his mind to hand over the hostages as soon as he saw Ning Cheng. Once he got the indenture agreement and the money to pay off his debts, he would immediately return to the Wintercrow clan. He had no interest in Cloud Realm continent conflicts and wars. He only wanted to hide as far away as possible. Mu Ling stared at Deacon Jin's retreating form and only felt that he was acting strangely. Why did he suddenly turn hostile? That night, Mu Ling found a chance to have a private conversation with Ning Jing. She told her everything Deacon Jean had said to Ning Jing. Say, who do you think we're going to see? This is Sky River City. They wouldn't be colluding with June Xie, right? Mu Ling asked in a low voice. Ning Jing's first reaction was Ning Cheng. Mu Ling almost screamed at the name, but Ning Jing covered her mouth in time. June Xie doesn't have any money. My big bro was kidnapped by Yu Qiao. So Ning Cheng must be in June Xie's army. My big bro has silver, or else that old man wouldn't have come here. Jean Z wouldn't have come either. Ning Jing said seriously. Your big bro is colluding with June Isia. He's going to betray my big sis. Mu Ling was most concerned about this. Impossible. Ning Jing was very serious. Mu Ling, remember this. Even if the entire D clan betrays the Western Qin Imperial clan, my big bro won't. He must have been threatened. As Ning Jing spoke, she glanced at the masked old man sleeping on the grass by the door. I suspect that guy is colluding with June Isia. Remember, if you see him in a few days, don't say a word. Act according to circumstances, understand? Mu Ling asked timidly. Ning Jing, why do you trust your big bro so much? Western Qin is his trust and his responsibility. Do you understand? Ning Jing answered. Mu Ling didn't understand. She shook her head and asked again, Ning Jing, do you trust Tang Li? Tang Li. It had been a long time since anyone mentioned this name in front of her. However, she would think of him almost every day. In the past, she always wanted to escape and fly away. Now that they were truly separated, she realized that she wasn't as carefree as she thought she was. The child in her womb was growing bigger by the day. It was almost 5 months old. However, the child's father didn't even know of his existence. Ning Jing didn't say anything and closed her eyes. Mu Ling hesitated for a long time. Finally, she leaned over and whispered, Ning Jing, can I tell you something else? Okay. Ning Jing seemed to be tired. I think that this time, if we really can't go back this time, or if we die in a foreign land. If you don't know about this, then you've lived your life in vain. Mu Ling said very seriously. Ning Jing immediately looked over. What is it? Actually, Tang Li likes you. Mu Ling was afraid that Ning Jing wouldn't believe her, so she quickly told her about Tang Li's situation in prison and her sister's plan to let Tang Li take her away. Ning Jing sat up abruptly and looked at Mu Ling in disbelief. Not far away, Deacon Jean sensed the commotion and looked over. Ning Jing calmed down a little and lay down again. Mu Ling persuaded her in a low voice, don't be anxious. Be careful not to affect the baby again. She had put in a lot of effort to take care of Ning Jing's stomach during the journey. If the baby was affected again, she would definitely cry. Chapter 966. Ning Jing, my sister is also afraid that you'll affect the fetus. Besides, Tang Li also wanted to tell you personally, so don't blame my sister. She also didn't know that we would be kidnapped. Mu Ling could be considered a good sister. She didn't forget to speak up for Han Yunxi at a time like this. Ning Jing held Mu Ling's hand tightly with one hand and covered her mouth with the other. She was silent for a long time before she choked out, Linger, do you know? I really miss him. Mu Ling was a crybaby. When she heard Ning Jing's choked voice, she couldn't help but cry. I also miss Chi, brother. Sob sob. Uncle Chung was startled awake. He walked over angrily, but was stopped by Deacon Jean. If you continue to make noise, what if people are attracted here? Uncle Chung said angrily. This is already June Isie's territory. What are you afraid of? Deacon Jean retorted. Uncle Chung couldn't refute and could only leave in a huff. Deacon Jean sat back in his original position. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the wall with his back straight. He closed his eyes and rested. Just now, he faintly heard Mu Ling call out, Chi, brother. How could that girl cry like this when she missed someone? He lowered his head. His fine bangs covered his eyes. The corners of his mouth were tightly pursed, and he wasn't in a good state. Ning Jing missed Tang Li, and Mu Ling missed Chi, brother. Tang Li and Gu had split up to look for them, but they hadn't found any clues yet. Tang Li counted all the routes that Hundred Poison sect used to pass through Tiana City. There were a total of 15 routes. He sent people to search for them one by one. He also ran around day and night, looking for the secret signal. However, it wasn't easy to determine the secret signal. He saw it carved on many trees and corners of houses. He copied all of them and sent them to Gu. He had sent more than 10 of them, but all of them were rejected by Gu. According to Gu, he really had forgotten. If Tang Li knew what the secret signal looked like, it would be much easier to find a target. Unfortunately, he didn't. Finally, one day, Tang Li realized that relying on Gu wasn't reliable. He started a carpet search and search, while announcing to the world in the name of the Tang sect that as long as Ning Jing was returned to him, he was willing to give up 30 top-secret weapon manufacturing blueprints. When the news is news, the first to boil over was naturally the Tang sect. However, the Tang sect's master was Long Fei Yi, and the sect master was Tang Li. Tang Zijin and the others couldn't find Long Fei Yi, and they couldn't contact Tang Li either. They wouldn't announce that Tang Li's orders were invalid, so they could only wait and see. Deacon Jean and Uncle Chung were very surprised. It had to be said that if it weren't for the fact that he wanted to take back his slave contract from Ning Chung, Deacon Jean would still be tempted. The Tang sect had been a power that all sides wanted to win over for the past 100 years. 30 top-secret weapons were worth a lot. In fact, Uncle Chung was also tempted. Uncle Chung figured that once they met with Ning Chung, Ning Jing would be a huge bargaining chip for Ning Chung and Jun Yixie's cooperation. Gu had already searched through the eastern forests and entered northernly. His first reaction upon receiving the news was that Tang Li wasn't reliable. He only wanted Ning Jing and didn't mention Mu Ling at all. Thus, Gu immediately used his identity as His Excellency Pill Fiend to announce to the world that as long as Mu Ling was returned to him, he was willing to give up the entire Medicine Ghost Valley. Within a few days, the news had spread all over Cloud Realm continent. Ning Jing and Mu Ling became the subject of everyone's pursuit and discussion. At the same time, they became the envy and jealousy of Cloud Realm continent's women. Unfortunately, the two foolish women were kept in the dark and knew nothing of the matter. One day, Gu was preparing to leave northernly for three-way black market when he suddenly received a black letter with red words. The Book of Pills is unknown. Gu's devastatingly beautiful face turned black as soon as he read it. The Book of Pills had many meanings, one of which was used by an emperor to issue orders. This letter contained Long Fei Ye's orders and a warning to him to meet the poison sect immediately or face the consequences. Gu arched a brow and looked at the letter in his hands with disdain. "Do you think I'll go just because you tell me to? If I'm going, I'll eat this letter." So speaking, he crumpled the letter into a ball and tossed it into a ravine. He turned around and walked away, but he stopped after few steps. A serious and solemn expression appeared on his frivolous face. The letter didn't say much beyond asking him to meet the poison sect immediately. But Gu understood Long Fei Ye's intentions very well. Long Fei Ye wanted him to meet the poison sect immediately for two reasons. One, to deal with Bai Yanqing as a fellow undying freak, and two, to ask him about his immortality. Long Fei Ye had always kept his promise to keep his secret, but would he be able to keep it a secret this time? Actually, he still didn't know how he'd become a poison Gu human. He was raised into a freak so that he wouldn't die no matter what illness or injury he suffered. Later on, he discovered that his appearance and body had remained the same as when he was 20 years old. The legendary Poison Gu man was immortal, indestructible, and immortal, so he thought he was one. After the medical conference, Gu Yuntian was locked up. He went to see Gu Yuntian to find out more about this matter. Judging from Gu Yuntian's reaction, he didn't know he was immortal. He was more or less certain that Gu Yuntian had accidentally raised him into a poison Gu human. Over the years, he'd infiltrated the poison sect's forbidden grounds many times in search of a way to break the curse, but to no avail. He'd once joked to Poison Lass that she could save him, but that was just a joke. He'd only sought out the poison sect's poison woman to use the poison sect to topple and destroy Medical City. Gu Qishao sighed softly before whistling to call for his horse. Then he set off for Medical City. A few days later, Han Yunqi's group secretly arrived at Medical City. Long Fei Yi really was a sly old fox. Even after they'd reached Medical City, he still ordered several groups of people disguised as him and Han Yunqi to continue on the road to create a false impression. Thus, news of their whereabouts spread all over the place. In order to ensure their cover, Gu Beiwen met with a few of Medical City's department heads and elders. He learned about the recent situation in Medical City and gave them a few important instructions. Medical City also continued to announce that President Gu Beiwei was in closed-door cultivation. That night, Han Yunqi's group rested in Medical City. They decided to enter the poison sect's forbidden grounds tomorrow morning. After dinner, Gu Beiwei excused himself, saying that he'd forgotten to tell Shun Jueming something, and left first. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi were left alone in the courtyard. Han Yunqi propped her chin on her hands as she stared at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi glanced at her, then poured a cup of tea for her. Han Yunqi didn't move, but smiled as she watched. "This is the latest winter slice. Try it," Long Fei Yi said. Winter slice was another name for winter tea. Spring tea was as expensive as oil, especially Ming Qian tea. However, winter tea wasn't cheap either. Half of the winter tea leaves were harvested in the autumn, which meant that the leaves were harvested in the winter. But the best winter tea came from winter buds and winter harvests. Han Yunqi still didn't move, but she managed to divert Long Fei Yi's attention. She asked, "Is spring tea better than winter tea?" Han Yunqi used to like drinking tea, but she didn't know much about it. Ever since she'd been with Long Fei Yi, she often drank tea with him, so she'd unknowingly gained a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of rain in spring, so the tea leaves are full and moist. As a result, the tea is fragrant, mellow, and long-lasting. Long Fei sipped his tea as he explained, his tone leisurely and indifferent. As for winter leaves, the cold weather means that the tea leaves grow slowly. The leaves are thick and firm, so they lack the bitter taste and have a hint of cold charm. This is especially true for high mountains, where the cold charm is especially obvious. If someone who didn't know his identity saw his carefree and relaxed demeanor, they might really think he was a reclusive expert who'd seen through the affairs of the world, calculated the hearts of the world, and stood aloof from the world. But those who knew his identity knew that he not only saw through the affairs of the world, but also understood the hearts of the world. He didn't stand aloof from the world, but held it in the palm of his hand. No matter how others saw him, Han Yunqi liked his current appearance the most. She couldn't help but want to play a song on the zither to help him drink tea and throw the troubles of the poison goo humans to the back of her mind. "Long Fei Yi, where's that monarch's whisper of yours?" Han Yunqi asked. That year at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet, Chu Qingge had challenged her to a zither duel, but she'd refused. When she returned to the Duke of Qin's estate, she played Lovers of the Liang for Long Fei Yi to hear. Back then, she'd used Long Fei Yi's monarch's whisper of hers. Monarch's whisper of time. "You want to play the zither in Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Gardens?" Long Fei Yi asked. "No, I'm just asking." Han Yunqi sighed with emotion. "When can we go back to Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Gardens?" "In another 2 months, all the plum blossoms will be in full bloom, right?" 2 months. Long Fei Yi silently calculated the time. 2 months, they probably wouldn't be able to go back. He had plenty of gardens and gardens, but she had no interest in any of them except Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Gardens. Wasn't he the same? "Next year, then. Starting from next winter, we'll go there every year to celebrate the new year," Long Fei Yi promised. Han Yunqi nodded seriously. The situation in Cloud Realm Continent should have stabilized after a year. 1 year. Han Yunqi was silently calculating the time as well. As for what it was, only she knew. Their tea grew cold in the time it took to speak. Tea had to be drunk while it was hot, especially in winter. Long Fei Yi helped Han Yunqi change her cup, but Han Yunqi immediately changed the subject. "Long Fei Yi, by Yanqing is undying and indestructible. How lonely and boring must he be? Will he?" Long Fei Yi asked mildly. "At least he'll be in pain. If he has a sweetheart, family, or friends, he'll definitely be in pain," Han Yunqi said seriously. "Watching one's loved ones grow old and leave one's side while remaining powerless in the same place. How much pain would he have to endure if he had to personally send away his loved ones? An undying and indestructible person would only end up being abandoned in the end." Han Yunqi quickly denied her own thoughts. "By Yanqing probably won't. Bai Yanqing probably had nothing left in his heart. He only had himself. Long Fei Yi fell silent for a long time before he finally said, "If it was anyone else, they probably would." His slender fingers tapped lightly on the table. "Goo, that fellow should be on his way here by now." Chapter 967. For the entire night, Han Yunshi kept diverting Long Fei Ye's attention so that Long Fei Yi didn't have a chance to make her drink tea. But in the end, Long Fei Yi still frowned and asked, "You don't like winter flakes?" "I'm too full to drink." Han Yunshi's reason was very good. Long Fei Yi wanted to ask more, but Han Yunshi grabbed his hand and smiled as they walked. "Long Fei Yi, if tea and I were to fall off a cliff one day, who would you choose?" Long Fei Yi smiled helplessly. "There's no need to fall off a cliff. If you don't like it, I'll try to quit starting tomorrow." Han Yunshi laughed. "I'm just kidding." The two had just entered the room when Su Donglin came over. "Your Highness, Miss Mingxiang has arrived at Medical City. We'll meet at the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds tomorrow," Long Fei Yi instructed calmly. Han Yunshi was surprised. "Why did you have Bailey Mingxiang come?" The sword had already pierced his heart, but Bai Yanqing still couldn't die. Heaven knows if his body was even harder to destroy than a steel wall. Even if Bailey Mingxiang lured Bai Yanqing over, the blazing red lotus wouldn't be able to kill Bai Yanqing. But Long Fei Yi asked seriously, if Bai Yanqing's undying body is exposed, would he still need to kill Bailey Mingxiang? Han Yunshi finally understood Long Fei Ye's meaning. Bai Yanqing's martial arts weren't that far behind Long Fei Ye's, so he knew that Bailey Mingxiang was someone who could dual cultivate with Long Fei Yi, so he had to kill Bailey Mingxiang. He didn't want to see Long Fei Ye's martial arts improve and widen the gap between them. But now that they knew about Bai Yanqing's undying body, Bai Yanqing didn't need to worry about Long Fei Ye's martial arts improving. In any case, he didn't need to hide his undying body from Long Fei Yi anymore. He could reveal his true strength and compete with Long Fei Yi. And no matter how strong Long Fei Ye's martial arts were, even if he cultivated the lust bite energy to the 3rd level, he still couldn't kill Bai Yanqing, right? In other words, there was no need for Bai Yanqing to find trouble with Bailey Mingxiang. Could it be that you suspect the lust bite energy? Han Yunshi couldn't believe it. The lust bite's energy, Long Fei Ye's energies. Perhaps Long Fei Yi was just testing the waters. He really wasn't confident. If Bai Yanqing found them and continued to attack Bailey Mingxiang like he did a Hunter Poison Sect, it would be very suspicious. "We can give it a try." Han Yunshi nodded, secretly hoping that she'd be able to gain something from the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds tomorrow. After closing the door, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi didn't talk much. They still had important matters to attend to. In the past 2 months, with Long Fei Ye's help, Han Yunshi had already cultivated 100% of her Nirvana heart power. Her needle skills were getting better and better, and she'd learned quite a bit of Qigong as well. During the 100 Poison Sect incident, she'd been afraid of exposing her martial arts, so she'd followed Long Fei Yi and didn't fight. Now that she could control her Nirvana heart power, it was time for Long Fei Yi to officially begin dual cultivation with her. The reason Han Yunshi wanted to cultivate Nirvana heart arts was because Long Fei was cultivating the same thing. Nirvana heart power was the foundation of their dual cultivation, as well as the medium for it. Yin and Yang energies complemented each other. Only through a medium could they influence and help each other. And Long Fei Ye's lust bite energy needed to borrow the power of Yin and Yang to break through. In this dual cultivation, Long Fei Yi would be the master, and Han Yunshi would be the support. Long Fei Yi could use the strengthening of his Nirvana heart power and the support of Yin and Yang energy to push the lust bite energy forward. Meanwhile, Han Yunshi's internal energy would also grow stronger. Once the dual cultivation succeeded, she'd be able to control the lust bite energy as she wished. At that time, learning any of Celestial Mountain sword arts would be a piece of cake for her. Are you ready? Once you start, you must cultivate for 2 hours every day for the next 3 months. You can't stop. Long Fei Yi reminded her seriously. Han Yunshi casually replied, "What do I need to prepare? In any case, I've decided to rely on you for the rest of my life. I won't leave." Long Fei Yi obviously wanted to laugh, but he didn't. He turned his head and coughed a few times. "Then let's begin." Long Fei Yi chose a rather spacious warm couch and moved the small tea table in the middle down. The two sat face to face on the warm couch, looking into each other's eyes. Dual cultivation meant cultivating together at the same time. Not only cultivating the body, but also cultivating the heart. Cultivating the body meant that the two of them had to combine their martial arts into one. Cultivating the heart meant that they had to have a tacit understanding of each other. The two of them sat quietly for a full hour. Unknowingly, the two of them had already closed their eyes. They didn't need to look, but used their hearts to feel each other's existence. Suddenly, they opened their eyes at the same time and smiled at each other, understanding each other's intentions. They were originally husband and wife with deep feelings for each other. Cultivating the heart was not difficult for them. Long Fei Yi grabbed the profound frost sword hanging on the wall. He pulled out the sword and gave it to Han Yunshi, leaving the scabbard for himself. "Just one sword? I'll have to trouble you for a while. I'll have Su Donglin find a good sword for you." Long Fei Yi said. "Okay, I'll wait." Han Yunshi was overjoyed. She was always full of anticipation for the gift this fellow wanted to give her. Actually, Han Yunshi did not feel wronged at all. Long Fei Ye's profound frost sword had never been touched by anyone since he took it from the old man Kenzo. Han Yunshi was the first. Thinking back, Duanmu Yao had racked her brains to obtain this sword. Unfortunately, she did not even touch it. Long Fei Yi held the scabbard while Han Yunshi held the sword. In the room, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi quickly exchanged blows. Han Yunshi did not know any sword techniques. Long Fei Yi only told her, "You can block." Han Yunshi did as she was told. As she blocked, she unknowingly found that her sword seemed to have strength. Han Yunshi did not understand anything, but she completely trusted Long Fei Yi and followed his rhythm. Unknowingly, his movements, which were messy and disorderly at the start, seemed to have become orderly and orderly. Han Yunshi's innate talents were excellent, so she quickly grasped the rules and changed from passive to active. Her sword stabbed towards Long Fei Yi, but Long Fei Yi blocked it with a scabbard and accurately retracted Han Yunshi's sword. "You're almost catching up to me in the past." Long Fei Yi was thrilled. Han Yunshi's comprehension skills exceeded his expectations. "You've taught me well." Han Yunshi grinned. Long Fei Yi removed his scabbard and tossed it to one side. Then he began to guide Han Yunshi through the sword dance. He swung his sword multiple times in a seemingly calm manner, but Han Yunshi could clearly feel the sword chi circling around them, strong and vigorous. "Transform your energy into chi, and chi into light," Long Fei Yi murmured. "Yunshi, close your eyes. Don't think about anything, I'll guide you." Long Fei Yi wrapped one arm around her waist and the other around her sword-wielding hand to guide her. It was unclear what Long Fei Yi felt, but Han Yunshi only felt like she wasn't cultivating, but dancing. Surrounded by his aura, she didn't even want to open her eyes. She only wanted to immerse herself in it forever. The first dual cultivation took a long time. The two of them didn't finish until midnight. Han Yunshi sat on the bed, clearly feeling the warmth in her dantian. There was a strange, yet familiar chi settling in there. She rubbed her stomach with a smile. "It's warm and very comfortable." Long Fei Yi immediately reached over. Han Yunshi recovered her senses and followed his touch. But Long Fei Yi's hand didn't move away as soon as it touched her. He had been half lying down, but unknowingly moved closer to Han Yunshi. By the time Han Yunshi realized what was going on, it was already too late. Long Fei Yi gave her a light push, causing her to topple backwards onto the bed covers. He leaned over and looked down at her, a naughty smile on his lips. Ever since her leg injury had healed, he had yet to properly dote on her. Han Yunshi's hands pressed against Long Fei Yi's body. Long Fei Yi was dissatisfied and was about to speak up when Han Yunshi actually helped him undress. Long Fei Yi was very surprised. Han Yunxi's face was clearly red, but her movements were becoming bolder and bolder. Once Han Yunxi took the initiative, there was nothing she couldn't do. It wouldn't end so easily. As expected, Han Yunxi slept until noon when they were supposed to set out early the next morning. When she woke up, she was so shocked that she forgot to put on her shoes and got off the bed. Long Fei Yi was sitting on the side, reading a secret letter. He glanced at her jade feet and said unhappily, "Aren't you cold? Put on your shoes." "It's already noon. Why didn't you wake me up?" Han Yunxi complained. Long Fei Ye's gaze was already back on the letter. He said mildly, "You're so tired. It's better to sleep more." Han Yunxi had just returned to the bed when she recalled how she was so tired that she had to beg for mercy under him last night. She almost fell onto the bed. She snuck a glance back and looked suspiciously at Long Fei Yi. She was incomparably bewildered. Does this guy never get tired? Although it was embarrassing, Han Yunxi didn't regret it. She was secretly working hard towards a certain goal. Han Yunxi cleaned up and ate a meal when Gu Beiwei arrived. They secretly rushed to the poison sect's sky pit and found that Bailey Mingxiang had been waiting for a long time. "Your Highness, Princess." Bailey Mingxiang bowed, then nodded at Gu Beiwei. She thought that she would be able to spend the rest of her life peacefully after returning to the army. She never expected to come back and see His Highness and the princess again. She was actually very flustered, but she didn't show it. However, even if she showed it, who would notice it? "Princess, is there any news of little Yuer?" This was what she was most worried about. The D clan had been searching for Ning Cheng's whereabouts this entire time, but wasn't Han Yunxi the same? Ning Cheng's whereabouts were equivalent to Su Xiaoyu's whereabouts. Jun Yixie's side was the most suspicious, but Long Fei Ye's men hadn't been able to find anything despite their inquiries. It was harder to infiltrate an important military base than anywhere else. And given Jun Yixie's personality, if Ning Cheng fell into his hands, he wouldn't be able to keep his cool. He would definitely show up to save his master after the battle at 100 Poison Sect. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't know that Jun Yixie and Bai Yanqing's master-disciple relationship had long been severed. Otherwise, she wouldn't have eliminated Jun Yixie from her list of suspects. "Let's go to the altar," Han Yunxi said seriously. Last time, they discovered the altar in the underground palace of the Poison Grounds purely by chance. They'd fallen into the abyss due to a crack in the ground. Now, they didn't need to go through the underground palace to get to the altar. They could just go straight to the abyss. What would happen at the altar? Chapter 968. To the west of the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds was a large rift valley. Inside the valley was a dense, dark forest. Every tree and blade of grass could be used to create poisons. As soon as Han Yunxi's group entered the forest, they could feel the chill. The valley was dark and cold to begin with, and it was winter now. It was a very strange sight. The vegetation was still lush, but the air was as cold as winter. Han Yunxi was already wearing a cloak, but Long Fei took off his own to drape it over her shoulders. Then he held her by the shoulders. Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang walked behind them and saw the scene. Bailey Mingxiang's expression was calm, as if he hadn't seen anything. However, Gu Beiwei's lips curved into a warm smile. The deeper they went into the forest, the dimmer the light became. Finally, just as they were about to enter the darkness, they saw a large circular altar in the distance. The altar was made of stone and looked very simple and unadorned. It was surrounded by stones with a tall, wordless stele in the center. From a distance, the entire altar looked solemn and mysterious. Han Yunxi hadn't forgotten the feeling she'd felt when she first saw the stele. It was like her soul had been sucked away and she couldn't control herself. Long Fei Yi also couldn't forget Han Yunxi's dazed expression when he first saw her here. If possible, he didn't want to come here a second time. Han Yunxi didn't dare to stare at it for too long. She turned back to Gu Beiwei and saw that Gu Beiwei was also staring at the stele. "Gu Beiwei, were you the one who saved me back then?" Han Yunxi smiled. Back then, when they were fighting with Chu Tianyin in the secret passage, the passage had caught fire and collapsed, causing a crack to appear in the ground. No one had expected it at the time, So Long Fei Yi didn't have time to catch her. She remembered that when she fell, her head was dizzy. When she woke up, she had already landed on the ground and was safe and sound. At that time, she only felt that it was very strange, and faintly felt that there was a white shadow following behind her. Gu Beiwa laughed. It is this subordinate who has frightened the princess. You save her life. Long Fei, you would only talk more when he was with Gu Beiwa. More than one life, Han Yunqi said seriously. Gu Beiwa had saved her many times while he was hiding his identity. The three of them chatted and laughed. Bailey Mingxiang was alone and very quiet. She looked at Gu Beiwa with envy. She firmly believed that Dr. Gu liked Princess. However, the princess still didn't know about it. Presumably, she wouldn't know for the rest of her life. To be able to love someone to this extent was also a kind of happiness. Unfortunately, she couldn't do it anymore. As they approached, the wordless stele in the altar gradually became clearer. The wordless stele was still simple and mysterious. The upper part had been weathered and blackened, but the lower part was covered in moss. The upper part was lifeless, while the lower part was full of vitality. It was like light and darkness, life and death intertwined. I saw words on the stele in my dream, but I didn't finish reading it, Han Yunqi said seriously. They stopped outside the altar and could clearly see that there was not a single word on the stele. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwa looked at the stele seriously. Gu Beiwa even stepped over the short stone wall and walked in. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had wanted to get closer for a long time, but they were a little afraid. The stele was clearly only a head taller than Gu Beiwa, but Gu Beiwa felt small standing in front of it. Even Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi felt the same way. Gu Beiwa walked around and looked carefully. He even gently touched the moss on the stele, but he didn't find anything. Wait here, I'll go take a look. Long Fei Yi's fear was all because of Han Yunqi. Otherwise, there was no place in this world that he wouldn't dare to go. Han Yunqi nodded obediently. Long Fei Yi went over, but he didn't touch the stele. Instead, he checked the grass around the stele. Gu Beiwa had checked it before, so he wasn't worried. He stomped on the ground and knocked on the grass. Then, he carefully checked the short stone wall, but he didn't find the mechanism that he expected. Usually, the altar would be the highest place of the clan, and all the inheritance would be hidden in the altar. But if there were no hidden mechanisms, and there were no words on the stele, what could they do? Gu Beiwa turned back and said seriously, Princess, maybe the secret is hidden in the poison storage space? Han Yunqi didn't say anything. Maybe if she tried to walk closer and look at the stele carefully, maybe the same thing would happen again, and she would see the words on the stele again. She looked at Long Fei Yi, wanting to ask for his permission. But at this moment, Gu Beiwa suddenly exclaimed, Something's wrong. What's wrong? Long Fei Yi got up and walked over. There's something wrong with this stele. Gu Beiwa punched the stele. The stele actually made a faint buzzing sound. It's not stone. Long Fei Yi was very sure. He clenched his fist and punched it too. Long Fei's punch was much stronger than Gu Beiwa's, so the stone stele shattered into pieces with a loud crack. After the fragments fell to the ground, they saw a wordless stele made of Xian gold. There wasn't a single scratch on it, and it was perfectly preserved. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwa simultaneously examined it carefully, but neither of them found any words on the stele. But it had to be said that this was a huge discovery. Gu Beiwa and Han Yunqi exclaimed at the same time, Blood! The blood of a direct descendant of the poison sect could open the Xian gold door. Gu Beiwa had used the Xian gold door to confirm Han Yunqi's identity as a direct descendant of the poison sect. Why was this stele made of Xian gold? And why did it use stone as a disguise? Something was clearly wrong. Han Yunqi strode over, but before she could move, Long Fei Yi grabbed her hand. How could Gu Beiwa know that Han Yunqi had transmigrated? He only thought that Long Fei Yi was worried that Han Yunqi would be in danger if a crack suddenly appeared in the ground. Thinking up to here, Gu Beiwa turned to Bailey Mingxiang. Miss Mingxiang, if anything happens later, you should return to Medical City. Gu Beiwa was such a warm and attentive person. Bailey Mingxiang quickly nodded. Yes, thank you, Dr. Gu. The invisible Su Donglin appeared and stood by Gu Biyue's side to protect him. Han Yunshi bit her finger and carefully dripped a drop of blood onto the steel. They hadn't seen what had happened at the Xian Gold Door last time, but this time they saw it clearly. As soon as Han Yunshi's blood touched the steel, it was immediately absorbed and disappeared. Now that the blood had dripped, all that was left was to wait. However, the wait was a little long. Even Long Fei Yi had never been so nervous. Han Yunshi was flustered and couldn't help but lean closer to him. Gu Beiwei frowned and was rarely so serious. However, no matter how long they waited, nothing happened, whether it was inside or outside the altar. Could it be that there was something wrong with this method? Or was this Xian gold steel just a coincidence and didn't have any special meaning? Inside the steel, is there still? Long Fei Yi was about to try to break the Xian gold steel when a rustling sound suddenly came from around them. The short stone walls around the altar began to crack, just like how the wordless monument had been shattered, and the stones kept falling down. Soon, Han Yunshi and the others saw a very beautiful scene. The entire wall around the altar was made of colored glass and had good transparency. They could faintly see that there were many unknown rare flowers and plants growing inside. Han Yunshi immediately activated the detox system, but it didn't detect any poison in these flowers and plants. The poison sect's forbidden grounds were filled with poison, to say nothing of something hidden so well. These flowers and plants had to be poisonous. It looked like the poison was very rare, or else the detox system wouldn't have failed to detect the slightest abnormality. Han Yunshi looked around and found that there was a fruit stalk left on each of the plants. It was obvious that someone had plucked the fruit. The fruit stalks looked very fresh. Could it be that they'd just been plucked? Why had these poisonous plants been specially raised here? Who had raised them? How long had it been? What kind of poison had they plucked all the fruits to make? Han Yunshi was full of questions. If she didn't understand, Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei were even more confused. It should have been by Yanqing who plucked them, Gu Beiwei said seriously. Besides Han Yunshi, Bai Yanqing was probably the only one who could open the steel. What is he trying to do now? They hadn't discovered the antidote to the poison goo humans, but they discovered Bai Yanqing's secret instead. Han Yunshi was very worried. Let's keep looking, Long Fei Yi said mildly. He immediately looked to the right and said coldly, "Who's there?" Su Donglin reacted the fastest and immediately chased after the man. Long Fei Yi had the shadow guard protect Gu Beiwei while he brought Han Yunshi with him. They quickly overtook Su Donglin and saw a figure running out of the forest. There weren't many people who could come to this place. Long Fei Yi didn't plan to let the man go so easily. Even though the man had run far away, he still hugged Han Yunshi tightly and chased after him. But when they reached the darkness, Han Yunshi stopped them. "It's too dark here. We can't see anything. It's very dangerous. Let's go back." Long Fei Yi was a veteran and knew that it was unwise to continue chasing. Moreover, the man was hiding in the surroundings, and the shadow guard and Su Donglin didn't notice him. It was enough to show that the man's martial arts were extraordinary. Although it was a pity, Long Fei Yi still listened to Han Yunshi's advice and turned back. Everything was fine at the altar. Gu Beiwei saw them and quickly asked, "Who is it?" Long Fei Yi said mildly, "We didn't catch up. His Qigong is good, and his martial arts are not bad. It seems to be a man." Bai Yanqing? Gu Beiwei guessed, but he immediately rejected this idea. If it was Bai Yanqing, why would he hide and run away? From the looks of it, he must be very familiar with this place, Long Fei Yi said mildly. Han Yunshi and Gu Beiwei were alarmed. This man was the altar, so if he was familiar with this place, it was very likely that he was a direct descendant of the poison sect. "Let's go back first. We'll talk when we get back," Long Fei Yi said mildly. Since they'd already been targeted, it wouldn't be wise for them to stay here any longer. Han Yunshi smiled helplessly. She was the new poison sect head, but she still had to be so cautious in her own territory. She said, "Send a few poison guards to stand guard. Don't let the intruder come close." She had a feeling that the flowers and plants in the glass wall held a huge secret. Chapter 969. On the way back to Medical City, Han Yunxi mulled over the strange plants. She had all sorts of guesses, but they were just guesses. She couldn't deduce anything from them. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei weren't familiar with poisonous plants, so they were trying to figure out the identity of the mysterious man. Without a doubt, if that mysterious man was from the poison sect, then he had to have lived there for a long time. Perhaps he knew about Bai Yanqing and Lady Tianxin's past. They didn't return to their original residence. Gu Beiwei had arranged for them to stay in a secluded and quiet courtyard closest to the poison sect's forbidden grounds in the forest behind Medical City. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi walked into the courtyard and saw that it looked like a courtyard house. There were many rooms, including a tea room, a dining room, and a kitchens. From the looks of it, we'll be staying here for a while. There's enough room here, Han Yunxi said. It was already evening, and everyone was a little tired after a busy day. Let's all rest. We'll talk about the altar tonight, Long Fei Yi mused. Gu should be here by now. He refused to believe that Gu wouldn't come. Gu definitely knew more about the poison sect and the poison Gu people than they did. Now that the situation at the altar wasn't clear, they should wait for Gu to arrive before planning a second attempt. Everyone returned to their rooms to rest, leaving Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin for last. Miss Mingxiang, your room is on the west side. You should rest early, Su Donglin said. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi stayed in the main room, Gu Beiwei in the east wing, and Bailey Mingxiang in the west wing. Although the west wing status was lower than the east wing, it was still more honorable than the lower wing Su Donglin and the Shadow Guard's rooms. Guard Su, we haven't settled on dinner yet. How about I write down a few menus so you can have your subordinates prepare the ingredients? Shall I cook a meal for you later? Bailey Mingxiang asked. In fact, Su Donglin was only in charge of security. Her Royal Highness really did need a maid to take care of the daily affairs. Bailey Mingxiang was thoughtful and considerate, but unfortunately, Su Donglin secretly sighed in his heart. He smiled and said, "Fortunately, you reminded me. Otherwise, I would have really forgotten about this matter." Just like that, when the sky fell, Bailey Mingxiang laid out a table full of fragrant dishes. Not only did she cook a table full of dishes for her masters, but she also prepared a table full of dishes for Su Donglin and the other shadow guards. Su Donglin patrolled the surrounding area and asked the shadow guards to eat. Bailey Mingxiang also stayed in the kitchen to eat with the shadow guards. Han Yunxi and the others ate in the courtyard. Gu Beiwei praised after tasting the first mouthful. I didn't expect Miss Bailey to have such good culinary skills. Han Yunxi was actually very used to it. She also liked Bailey Mingxiang's dishes very much. She smiled and said, her culinary skills are very good. Even Granny Zhao can't compare to her, let alone me. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Fei Yi exposed her. When have you ever cooked? Other than the extremely sour pastry he had eaten, this woman had never personally cooked a meal for him or boiled a bowl of soup, right? Long Fei Yi doted on Han Yunxi very much, but in some matters, he would also have requirements. Gu Beiwei snickered and lowered his head to eat. Han Yunxi clearly saw Gu Beiwei snickering. She was embarrassed and didn't say anything. She lowered her head to eat. Let's have a taste sometime. Long Fei Yi's words weren't a request, but an order. They were especially domineering. All right, but don't eat too much. I'll make supper for you later, Han Yunxi agreed. She wanted to see if Long Fei Yi could eat. They discussed the poison sect's altar as they ate. They decided to observe for a couple of days and send a few poison guards to search the area before making further plans. Is there no news of Bai Yanqing at all? Gu Beiwei asked. It had been a few days since they came from 100 Poison sect. They'd made the secret of the poison goo humans known to the world and caused an earthquake in Cloud Realm continent. But Bai Yanqing hadn't reacted at all. Where had he gone? Had he gone into hiding, or was he plotting something? Long Fei Yi said indifferently. It's not that there's no news of him. At least for now, it's good news for us. Han Yunxi nodded in acknowledgement of this point. That night, before they began dual cultivation, Han Yunxi really did go to the kitchens to cook. There were limited ingredients, so she only made a pot of noodles. She had Su Donglin deliver a bowl to Gu Beiwei. She didn't know if Gu Beiwe had eaten or not. But when the noodles reached Long Fei Yi glanced at them and immediately waved for Su Donglin to throw them away. Hey, you should at least try it. Han Yunqi panicked. Shouldn't this guy have taken a bite and found it disgusting? But because she made it herself, he had to endure the disgust and eat it all? Have you tried it before? Long Fei Yi countered. It's not bad. Han Yunqi had tried it before, but that was before she put it into the pot. When the noodles were cooked, it was clearly noodle soup. But after it was put into the pot, it turned into dough lumps. There was no soup left. Then you can eat it yourself, Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunqi was speechless. She complained, at least it's my first time cooking. But Long Fei Yi replied, there will be plenty of chances in the future. Once it's cooked, I'll have enough to eat it for the rest of my life. What could Han Yunqi say? She could only let Su Donglin send the noodles away. The moment Su Donglin left, he immediately laughed out loud. How rare. It was rare for His Highness to reject the princess so thoroughly. He was worried that if His Highness continued to spoil the princess, he would eventually become a slave to his wife. In the East Wing, Gu Beiwe faced a bowl of dough lumps, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. However, he still silently finished the entire bowl. From his expression, it was hard to tell whether the noodles tasted good or not. When the shadow guard came over to clean up, he said, please thank the princess for me. The shadow guard looked at the bowl that was clean. Thinking of the dough lumps that Su Donglin threw away, he couldn't help but admire him. As a subordinate, Gu Beiwe was absolutely competent. The shadow guard didn't know that the reason why Gu Beiwe ate so cleanly was not because he was competent and obedient, but because he knew that it would be very, very difficult for him to have the opportunity to eat something personally cooked by the princess again. At this time, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had already started dual cultivation. Everything went smoothly last night. Today, Han Yunqi was more familiar with cultivation and quickly entered the state. After cultivating, she wasn't as energetic as last night. Instead, she lazily lay on the bed, her eyelids almost closing. Thinking of her initiative last night and seeing her like this, Long Fei Yi almost suspected that she was faking it. But he couldn't bear to torment her. Instead, he lay down next to her and gently stroked her soft hair. Sleep. Before long, Han Yunqi really did fall asleep. Long Fei gently caressed her cheek with a soundless smile, both helpless and doting. He pulled her into his arms and tucked her in. He didn't know when it had become a habit, but he always had to hug her to sleep. Long Fei Yi quickly fell into a deep sleep as well. He didn't know that Han Yunqi wasn't really asleep, but that her soul had returned to the poison sex altar. It was like a dream, but also not. This feeling was very similar to when her consciousness entered the poison storage space, but it was also different. Han Yunqi couldn't tell what was different. She knew that she was in a dream. She was clearly awake, but she couldn't wake up. At this moment, she was standing outside the ancient altar in the poison sex forbidden grounds, staring at the wordless steel from a distance. Last time when she returned from the altar, she also dreamed of the wordless monument and saw the words on the monument. Could it be that this time, Han Yunqi was overjoyed? She didn't care if she was dreaming or just letting her mind wander. She immediately ran over to the steel. When she got close, she saw that it was exactly the same as they'd seen during the day. The stone layer had been peeled off to reveal a steel made of Xian gold, but there were no words on it. Han Yunqi was disappointed, but at this time, the steel suddenly emitted a faint golden light. From top to bottom, words began to appear. Han Yunqi was overjoyed. She hurried to read and realized that the words were the same ones she'd seen last time. The words sped up. At first, they appeared word by word, but later, they appeared line by line, paragraph by paragraph. Han Yunqi skipped the first part and read 10 lines at a glance. She was so anxious that she couldn't help but hold her breath. In the end, she fell to her knees in front of the Xian gold steel. But when Han Yunqi finished reading, the words on the Xian gold steel didn't disappear. Han Yunqi was so nervous that her forehead was covered in sweat. She stood up and looked at the motionless words. She almost couldn't resist kicking the Xian gold door. These words were all about the secrets of the poison storage space. Part of it was about the poison storage space's cultivation, while the other part was about its rules. Since the words hadn't disappeared, Han Yunxi put the secret of the altar aside and carefully read the introduction to the poison storage space's cultivation and rules. Han Yunxi had never been able to fully control the poison storage space before because she wasn't familiar with the rules. Now that she'd carefully read these words, she finally understood. Just as she'd guessed, every advancement in the poison storage space required an opportunity. This opportunity varied from person to person and wasn't fixed. In other words, she was now at the second level of the poison storage space. As long as she had enough foundation, she could advance once she encountered an opportunity. But if she didn't encounter an opportunity, no matter how hard she worked, it would be futile. After the third level of the poison storage space was cultivated to the maximum level, and once it reached the maximum level, she would be able to control the poison storage space's supreme power. But what kind of power this power was, the steel didn't say. Han Yunxi was very curious, but she didn't have the time to think about it. She continued to read carefully, because there was a mention of the poison beast's cultivation. Once the poison beast formed a contract, it wasn't just a contract with her, it was also a contract with her poison storage space. So, as long as she didn't forcefully interfere, the little thing could enter the poison storage space at will, and could sense everything outside the space. Once the master entered the second level of the poison storage space, the poison beast would be able to understand human language. In the first two levels, the master's cultivation would affect the poison beast's cultivation, and in the later levels, the poison beasts and the master's cultivation would affect each other, promoting each other. It was equivalent to cultivating the poison storage space's power together. With the poison beast's help, the speed of advancing to the third level would be faster. At the third level, the poison beast would be able to communicate with its master at any time through divine sense. Han Yunxi had some understanding of this before, but the steel recorded something else she didn't know. Chapter 970. The inscription recorded some information about the poison beast, but Han Yunxi had never heard of it before. She suddenly felt that she had let Little Thing down. She didn't know how it was doing now, if it missed her, if it missed its gongzi. According to the inscription, Little Thing should have been trapped in the poison storage space by Yanqing. As long as the owner of the poison storage space had a higher cultivation level than her and Little Thing, they could keep Little Thing in the poison storage space and restrict it from coming out. In other words, although Bai Yanqing was at the same level as her, but Bai Yanqing's cultivation level was higher than hers, so Little Thing could only be trapped. Only if she worked hard in her cultivation and surpassed Bai Yanqing, then Little Thing could regain its freedom. Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi's entire body perked up. She had thought that if she advanced to the third level of the poison storage space, she would be able to communicate with Little Thing through her consciousness, and maybe she would be able to understand some things. But now, she had found the most direct way to save Little Thing. Han Yunxi had never been so eager to start cultivating in the poison storage space. Although she didn't know where the opportunity to break through to the third level was, at least she had to raise her cultivation level first. This time, the dream was completely different from the last time. Last time, everything was blurry and rushed, as if she came and left in a hurry. But this time, the inscription on the black gold tablet was still there, her consciousness was also clear, and the time she stayed was obviously much longer than the last time. After Han Yunxi had thoroughly read the inscription, she began to observe the poison herbs in the surrounding glass walls. But soon, there was a strange sound behind her. Han Yunxi turned around and was immediately shocked by the scene in front of her. She saw a wolf head totem appear on the wordless tablet. That wolf head reminded Han Yunxi of Little Thing's real identity as a snow wolf. Following the appearance of the wolf head totem, the wordless tablet shook continuously, and the entire altar shook with it. Han Yunxi instinctively wanted to move away, but found a drop of red blood oozing out of the wolf head totem's forehead. In an instant, a crack appeared on the wordless steel. The crack grew bigger and bigger until it turned into a door. It was dark inside the door, as if it was an alternate dimension. No one knew where it led to. The poison sex altar actually hid such a secret? Could it be that only the poison sex direct descendants could see this door? Only then could the door be opened. What was that drop of blood on the wolf's head? Just as Han Yunshi was feeling suspicious, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her finger. She looked down and immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Unknowingly, her index finger had been bitten open, and blood kept oozing out. More and more blood oozed out, and in the end it was no longer oozing blood, but flowing blood. Blood continued to flow, covering the ground. Han Yunshi stared blankly, her face full of horror. She subconsciously pressed on the wound, but it was of no use. The blood continued to flow. She looked down and realized that her feet were covered in blood. The grass around the altar was dyed red with blood. She raised her head and looked at the cracked door. The darkness behind the door seemed to have a magical power that could suck people in. No! Frightened, Han Yunshi turned to flee. She couldn't tell if this was a dream or reality. She fled into the forest, running aimlessly. She didn't know where she was going. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand. Who was it? This scene had appeared in her dreams before, but she couldn't see the person's face clearly. She only felt that the temperature of this hand was very familiar. She looked up to see who was holding her hand, but the moment she did, her entire world shattered. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunshi woke up with a start and shot up from the bed. She didn't know why she called out Long Fei Ye's name, but perhaps it was an instinct. When she needed protection, the first person she thought of was him. Long Fei Yi immediately woke up and sat up as well. Before he could ask, he pulled Han Yunshi into his arms and held her close. I'm here, don't be afraid. Han Yunshi hugged Long Fei Yi tightly. She didn't know what she was afraid of, but this fear was stronger than ever. Why? Why can't I see that person's face? She quickly broke free from Long Fei Ye's embrace and took his hand, closing her eyes to feel it. The feeling of holding his hand was similar to the one in her dreams, but also different. She grew even more flustered. Long Fei Yi still held her tight and said softly, Yunshi, calm down. It's fine. It was just a dream, so it's fine. I'm here. This woman must have had a nightmare. After sharing the same bed with her for so long, he'd rarely encountered such a situation. She'd actually been frightened by a nightmare. Han Yunshi raised her head to look at Long Fei Yi. When she saw his familiar profile and warmth, her heart gradually calmed down. Seeing her calm down, Long Fei Yi asked, What nightmare did you have? The poison sex sacrificial altar. Han Yunshi murmured back. Long Fei Ye's body shook, but he quickly recovered. His voice was as gentle as ever. What you think about during the day, you think about it at night. Don't think about it anymore. Han Yunshi shook her head. No, I don't think it counts as a dream. She looked into his eyes. Long Fei Yi, I dreamed of the wordless steel again. I saw all the words on it, and a totem that looked a lot like Lil Things. Han Yunshi kept talking, but she didn't notice that Long Fei Ye's face had turned much paler. I saw blood seep out of the wolf's forehead. Then a door appeared on the wordless steel. It was very dark inside, and I didn't know where it led to, Han Yunshi said. You went in? Long Fei Yi asked hastily. A door had appeared on the wordless steel, so it couldn't lead to the real world. Then where did it lead? To 3,000 years in the future? Why was Han Yunshi so afraid? Long Fei Ye's heart trembled. No. Han Yunshi quickly examined her fingers and saw that the bite marks from the day were already very faint. There were no new wounds at all. She told Long Fei Yi about the bleeding, but Long Fei Yi was still worried. He carefully examined her fingers one by one. My blood might be able to open the wordless steel, Han Yunshi said. Long Fei Yi didn't speak and only hugged her. Seeing Long Fei Yi's silence, Han Yunshi finally realized that she had scared him. She turned and hugged him tightly, burying her head in his chest. Maybe it was just a dream. Long Fei Yi was silent for a long time before he said resolutely, "We'll try tomorrow. If we can open the door to the steel, I'll go in with you." If they couldn't avoid it, he didn't mind facing it with her. Where did this door lead to? Why did it appear on the poison sex altar? Was it related to Han Yunqi's status as a direct descendant of the poison sect? Or was it related to the secret of Han Yunqi's transmigration? Rather than avoid and fear, it was better to hold her hand and face it together. Han Yunqi shrank back and shook her head. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Long Fei Yi held her hand tightly, their fingers intertwined. That night, neither of them slept. They hugged each other quietly, their fingers intertwined as they waited for dawn to come. The next morning, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi woke up early. When Gu Beiwe walked out of his room, he saw the two of them sitting at a stone table in the courtyard, brewing tea. The winter morning was especially cold. White smoke curled up from the tea table as the fragrance of tea filled the air. It was a refreshing feeling. Gu Beiwe didn't know what happened last night, but he stepped forward and bowed. "Your Highness, Princess." Long Fei Yi gestured for him to sit down and personally poured him a cup of tea. As soon as Gu Beiwe sat down, he immediately sensed that Han Yunqi's expression wasn't right. Not only did she not sleep well, she had a lot on her mind. "Princess, what's wrong?" he hurriedly asked. Han Yunqi didn't say anything, so Long Fei Yi recounted the scene last night. Gu Beiwe didn't know that Han Yunqi had transmigrated, so he said seriously, "Princess, this shouldn't be a dream. It's the poison sex inheritance, passing on the techniques of the poison storage space through their consciousness." Han Yunqi also didn't know if it was a dream or not. Otherwise, how could the contents of the wordless steel be real? However, she didn't understand why her nightmare of holding hands would appear in the poison sex inheritance. Could the door to the wordless steel lead to the poison sex secret grounds? Gu Beiwe asked. This was good news for him. Perhaps the secret of the poison goo humans was hidden in the poison sex secret grounds. Perhaps the formula for the perplexing butterfly illusion was hidden there as well. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi naturally thought of this possibility. "Get ready. We'll give a try in a bit." Long Fei Yi had already made up his mind last night. Han Yunqi finally raised her head to look at him. Long Fei Yi's hand reached under the table and tightly grasped her hand. It was silent, but he gave her enough strength. Let's give it a try. If the door really opens, we'll go in together," Han Yunqi said seriously. Gu Beiwe could faintly sense that something was off with these few words. A complicated look flitted through his eyes. He wanted to ask, but after a moment's hesitation, he pretended that he had seen through everything and fell silent. He had always grasped the distance between him and Long Fei Yi, as well as the princess. There were some things that His Highness and the princess wouldn't talk about, so there was no need for him to ask. This was called doing one's duty. After breakfast, Han Yunqi and the others finished their preparations. Just as they were about to leave, they suddenly bumped into a person standing at the door. "Gu!" Han Yunqi exclaimed. She had forgotten how long it had been since she last saw this guy. Gu was dressed in red, luxurious and enchanting, and as elegant as ever. He just casually stood there, and the flowers that covered the mountains and plains were all overshadowed. He was laughing without a care in the world, laughing without restraint, laughing with incomparable joy. His long and narrow eyes narrowed into a line. "Poison girl, long time no see." Before he could finish his sentence, Long Fei Yi seemed to know what he was going to say, and immediately interrupted him coldly. "What are you doing here?" It was clearly Long Fei Yi who threatened him to come, but he still had the cheek to ask him what he was doing here. Gu pretended not to hear Long Fei Yi's words and continued to speak to Han Yunqi. "Brother Qi misses you. Do you miss Brother Qi?" However, Han Yunqi's face was gloomy. She said angrily, "Gu, when will you remember what Ling said to you?" Tang Li had already complained to her and Long Fei Yi about the secret signal. Tang Li felt that the secret signal was purely a waste of time looking for people and missed the best opportunity to save them. Chapter 971. Long Fei Yi did not give any response to Tang Li's complaint. Han Yunqi was different. If she did not question Gu, she felt that Ling had been wronged. If this guy did not like Ling why did he not be more straightforward and let Ling completely give up? Hurting her once was better than hurting her for a lifetime, right? Ling was still so young and unmarried. She would definitely meet someone who would cherish her in the future. Why did she have to fall into the hands of this evildoer, Gu? Her infatuation was completely ruined. In fact, Gu had never seriously considered Mu Ling's feelings for him. He was used to being heartless, so he was not interested in thinking so much. He touched his nose and did not refute a word. He quietly took the scolding. If Long Fei Yi had questioned him, he would have 1,000 reasons to refute. However, Han Yunqi had questioned him. He would just treat it as her punching bag. Mu Ling was missing. This woman must be angry and sad. He changed the topic. Is Bai Yanqing really a poison Gu human? Long Fei Yi had threatened him and was still putting on an act. What else could he do? He could only cooperate. After all, they had something on him. Is there no news about the robbers? Han Yunqi had to clarify this matter first. Tang Li and Gu had used the Tang sect's secret weapon recipe and the medicine Ghost Valley as bait. The robbers should be tempted. No, either the two of them have fallen into the hands of another group of people, or Jinzi and Old Chung have other uses for them. Gu finally said something serious. They should have other uses. At least their lives are not in danger for the time being. Now, we can only wait for news, Gu Beiwei said seriously. Han Yunqi recalled Uncle Cheng's face and Deacon Jin's gloomy eyes. She thought viciously, these two had better not fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll make them suffer a fate worse than death. He actually dared to kidnap Ning Jing, a pregnant woman, and Mu Linger, an innocent person. This was simply unforgivable. You couldn't have come to the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds to find the secret of the Poison Gu humans, right? Gu asked, could it be that you know something? Long Fei Yi asked, I know a lot about perplexing butterfly illusion, but as for Poison Gu humans, Gu pretended to tremble. I'm scared too. Long Fei's disdain for him had reached its peak. He looked at him coldly with an expressionless face. Then you can scram. Gu walked to Han Yunqi's side and said with a smile, Poison lass, you've angered a Poison Gu person and you still dare to run around. If that bastard Bai Yanqing comes looking for you. As Gu spoke, he gave Long Fei Yi a disdainful glance before continuing. If that bastard Bai Yanqing comes looking for you, we'll be able to save you. Han Yunqi wasn't in the mood to joke with him. She said seriously, we're going to the Poison Sect's altar right now and see if we can open the door to the wordless steel. Are you coming? The door to the wordless steel? Gu grew suspicious. He really didn't know such a thing existed. Are you going or not? Han Yunqi urged. With Gu around, they'd be safer. For one thing, Gu was familiar with the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds. For another, Gu's poison skills were stronger than any of her poison guards or mercenaries. If you're going, Chi Brother will naturally go as well. If anything happens, Chi Brother will protect you. Gu smiled. He looked like he was joking, but everything he said was true. Perhaps Long Fei Yi was the only one who understood him. He'd already decided to follow Poison Lass from now on in case Bai Yanqing came looking for revenge. Although he couldn't kill Bai Yanqing as a fellow immortal, he could at least keep him in check. Long Fei Yi's eyes were so dark that even Han Yunqi didn't dare to meet his gaze. She didn't waste any more words and said hastily, it's getting late. Let's go. Everyone be careful. So speaking, she took Long Fei Yi's hand and led the way. Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang followed behind. Gu stood there for a while before catching up. Unlike Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang, Gu liked Han Yunqi very freely. He even dared to say it in front of Long Fei Yi. He snorted disdainfully at the sight of them holding hands, but he didn't interfere. As he walked at the very back, there was some distance between him and Han Yunqi's group. As he walked, he casually plucked a stalk of grass and held it in his mouth. His long, narrow eyes were deep, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. However, Gu Beiwei didn't get far before he stopped and waited for him to catch up. Gu didn't say a word as he walked shoulder to shoulder with Gu Beiwe. He knew that Gu Beiwe would definitely tell him about the door to the wordless steel. As expected, Gu Beiwe did. Not only did he tell Gu about what happened at the altar yesterday and the mysterious man they met, he also told Gu about what Long Fei Yi had told him this morning. Gu Beiwe trusted Gu completely. As for Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiwe thought that the Long Fei Yi hadn't really told Gu to scram because he wanted Gu to know the situation and travel with them. Gu's eyes grew complicated after he heard everything. He said, "I've never seen any mysterious people appear in the poison sect's forbidden grounds, but I don't often go to the altar." He thought for a while, then said, "The people who appear at the altar are most likely from the poison sect. It's very difficult for outsiders to find that place. I don't dare go there. I hope it's not by Yanqing. There's still no news of him." Gu Beiwe sighed. Gu didn't say anything, but he had an idea. It looked like he'd have to be extra careful once he entered the forest. Bai Yanqing was too strange. Who knew what he was thinking? As the group walked, Long Fei Yi said to Han Yunxi, "I'll go ask Gu about Golden Wing Hall." Helpless, Han Yunxi was curious as well. She stopped and turned back to Gu, shouting, "Gu, come here for a second. I have something to ask you." Gu was delighted and ran over. He was about to show off to Long Fei Yi when Long Fei Yi spoke first. "When did Golden Wing Hall fall into your hands?" Gu finally realized that they were looking for him because of this, so he recounted how he'd gotten his hands on Golden Wing Hall from beginning to end. Han Yunxi listened attentively, but Long Fei Yi wasn't interested at all and didn't listen at all. "If it wasn't for Golden Wing Hall, we wouldn't have been able to keep Myriad Merchant Hall in check." Han Yunxi spoke the truth. Gu smiled. "If you like it, I'll give it to you." Han Yunxi rolled her eyes at him, not knowing what to say. Long Fei Yi's next words made Gu feel extremely awkward. "When are you going to clear your debt to Kingan Private Bank?" Gu had been busy this year and hadn't paid much attention to Golden Wing Hall's medicine business, so it wasn't as profitable as before. Ever since Three-Way Black Market's gambling house was damaged, Golden Wing Hall had suffered huge losses. Although it wasn't to the extent of losing money, the flow of funds had been affected. Once the flow of funds was affected, the auction house's business was affected as well. Those in the auction house needed to stock up. This was a huge amount of capital. Before Gu returned to Three-Way Black Market, Golden Wing Hall had borrowed a sum of money from Kingan Private Bank and hadn't paid it back yet. Gu didn't answer Long Fei Yi, obviously pretending not to hear. However, he tactfully kept his mouth shut and didn't say anything else. Long Fei Yi had basically become his nemesis. Han Yunxi snickered inwardly. Gu, this guy, would probably fall for his cheap mouth one day. If he spoke properly, Long Fei Yi and she would be grateful to him based on his contributions to Golden Wing Hall. Gu lowered his head, his eyes gloomy as he walked silently to the side. Long Fei Yi gave Su Donglin a look, and Su Donglin immediately came over. "Princess, this subordinate has something to ask." "What is it?" Han Yunxi asked. This subordinate heard that there is a poison that can make a person's limbs tremble. "Is there really such a poison?" Su Donglin asked humbly. When it came to professional matters, Han Yunxi's attitude was professional. She seriously explained to Su Donglin, "There is such a poison and there are many types. It can be roughly divided into 4 types. The first is..." Han Yunxi focused on answering Su Donglin. Long Fei Yi had already walked to Gu's side. He lowered his voice and questioned, "You dare to go back on your word with this crown prince?" Gu knew that he was in the wrong, but he didn't regret it. He said in a low voice, "For poison, lass, what's wrong with going back on my word?" He had mentioned Mute Granny because he was afraid that Poison Lass would be tricked by Long Fei Yi. "Don't mention her," Long Fei Yi said coldly. Gu didn't continue arguing with him. Instead, he became serious and said calmly, "Count it as me owing you a favor. I will continue to help you break through the perplexing butterfly illusion. Guard against Bai Yanqing well." This was Long Fei Yi's request. Gu glanced at him. "No need for your nonsense. I will protect her." However, Long Fei Yi's next words almost made Gu spit out blood. Long Fei Yi said, Not only her, but also this crown prince and Gu Beiwei. From now on, you and Su Donglin will be in charge of our defense. Fuck. Long Fei, you wanted him to be a guard. Gu stopped in his tracks. He finally realized that he had been tricked by Long Fei Yi. How was Long Fei Yi keeping his word? He was clearly keeping a card up his sleeve to threaten him. You can refuse. Long Fei shrugged his shoulders, unwilling to force her. Gu wanted to bark and bite him. Han Yunxi was focused on explaining things to Su Donglin on the side, so she didn't know what was happening behind her. Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang were watching Long Fei Yi and Gu's backs from behind. Although the two of them didn't know what they were talking about, they could tell that behind Han Yunxi's back, they were arguing in a low voice. Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang both secretly laughed. Their thoughts were the same. Only His Highness could anger Gu with a few words. Only Gu's appearance could make the taciturn His Highness speak so much. Gu didn't leave, so Long Fei Yi took it as a yes. He asked in a low voice, how did he become? Although he didn't finish a sentence, Gu Qixiao understood. Gu was irritated at the mention of this matter. He didn't know how to explain it. After a while, he said seriously to Long Fei Yi, Long Fei Yi, I really don't know if I'm a poison Gu human. Maybe I'm just a freak. Long Fei Yi was slightly stunned, but he didn't show it. He still asked coldly, what's going on? Gu could only tell him the truth. Long Fei Yi was very surprised. He was about to ask more, but Han Yunxi had finished talking to Su Donglin and was looking back. Chapter 972. Seeing Han Yunxi turn around, Long Fei Yi and Gu didn't say anything else. Long Fei Yi looked straight ahead expressionlessly, while Gu crossed his arms and chewed on a piece of straw. He turned to look at the side of the road with an expression that couldn't be more sullen. With Gu like this, anyone walking next to him would feel like they owed him a huge debt. Of course, Long Fei Yi was an exception. Long Fei Yi had long become Gu's creditor. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi and then at Gu. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. Too lazy to pay them any attention, she walked to the back and joined Gu Beiwei and Bailey Mingxiang. Princess, His Highness, Gu Beiwei asked suspiciously. Their 8 characters don't match, I guess, Han Yunxi said with a chuckle. Gu Beiwei also laughed, but he soon said seriously, Princess, 7th young master is quite reliable. Indeed, apart from Mu Linger, Gu was very reliable when it came to matters of right and wrong. If he hadn't fooled Myriad Merchant Hall and saved Gu Beiwei, perhaps they would still be in the 3-way black market today. As they walked, Han Yunxi suddenly remembered the bowl of noodles from last night. She asked jokingly, how did it taste? If the shadow guard hadn't come over to tell her, Han Yunxi wouldn't have believed that Gu Beiwei would have eaten it clean. Gu Beiwei said with a straight face, it would have tasted better with more salt. Han Yunxi looked at him suspiciously. After a while, she said, Gu Beiwei, you've improved. Gu Beiwei didn't understand. You know how to flatter. Han Yunxi said seriously. Gu Beiwei's answer was too good. It didn't hurt Han Yunxi's face, and it didn't seem too fake. Those who haven't seen the miserable state of the bowl of noodles will definitely think that Han Yunxi's cooking skills are not bad after hearing his words. Even Han Yunxi herself felt comfortable listening to it. She felt that she wasn't that bad after all. Bailey Mingxiang couldn't help but laugh. This was the first time he heard the princess mock Dr. Gu. Han Yunxi looked at Bailey Mingxiang. Bailey Mingxiang immediately lowered his head, realizing that he had been rude. Han Yunxi looked at her for a long time and finally said, Mingxiang, here. Bailey Mingxiang looked over. Han Yunxi walked over and said with a smile, when we get back, I'll discuss cooking with you. When we get back, I'll make a few more dishes for Gu Beiwei to try. Seeing Han Yunxi smile, Bailey Mingxiang finally stopped being nervous and careful. She nodded happily and said, okay. Gu Beiwei smiled but didn't say anything. He was very happy. Han Yunxi walked at the back. Long Fei Yi and Gu didn't have a chance to quarrel. Long Fei Yi soon stopped and waited for Han Yunxi to walk up. The moment Han Yunxi walked to his side, he took her hand and interlocked their fingers tightly. Gu deliberately walked to Han Yunqi's side and walked side by side with them. No matter how malicious Long Fei Ye's gaze was, Gu Beiyue would always return it with a dazzling smile. If they were competing in terms of shamelessness, Long Fei Yi would still lose to Gu Beiyue. Long Fei Yi tugged Han Yunqi to the side. Gu didn't follow, but swaggered to Long Fei Ye's side. Behind them, it wasn't just Gu Beiyue and Bailey Mingxiang. Even Su Donglin and the others couldn't stop snickering. Just like that, the group of people headed for the poison sex altar with surging emotions. Once they reached the altar, everyone turned serious. Although the altar had undergone a terrifying transformation in Han Yunqi's dream, the altar before them hadn't changed at all. It looked exactly the same as it did yesterday. As soon as Gu Qixiao arrived, his attention was drawn to the rare poison plants in the stained glass wall. These were the most beautiful plants he'd ever seen. The stems and leaves of these poisonous plants were transparent and shrouded in a faint layer of light. They were multicolored and dazzling, like a dream or a fantasy. So beautiful that it almost seemed unreal. Gu had never seen these poisonous plants before, so he couldn't tell if they were poisonous or not. However, based on his years of experience growing medicinal plants, he could tell that these poisonous plants had lived for a very long time. Poison lass, these poisonous plants have lived for at least 1 or 200 years, Gu said seriously. 1 or 200 years. Was the fruit recently plucked? Han Yunqi asked again. She was very professional when it came to identifying poisonous plants, but not when it came to their age. If not for the detox systems analysis, she wouldn't have been able to tell with the naked eye. This fruit should have been plucked at least 10 years ago. Gu replied as he observed. How can you tell? Long Fei Yi couldn't help but ask. Gu glanced at him hot. Long Fei Yi wasn't so easily provoked. He snorted. You must have seen wrongly. Gu was easily provoked by Long Fei Yi. He immediately said, I can't be wrong. The thickness of the roots, the size and color of the leaves, and the gears on the edges of the leaves. Different plants have different ways of identifying them, so I can only give a vague estimate. I can't be precise. Also, Gu wanted to continue explaining, but Long Fei Yi raised his hand and stopped him. All right, I understand. Gu was stunned. He then realized that he had fallen in a Long Fei Yi's trap. His beautiful face immediately darkened, and the people around them almost laughed. Fortunately, they managed to hold it in. Long Fei Yi didn't expect Gu to figure out something that even Han Yunqi couldn't figure out. He asked seriously, Where's the wolf head totem? Han Yunqi walked to the front of the wordless monument and closed her eyes. She tried to find a location of the wolf head totem in her dream. Most of the time, she couldn't remember a dream. However, Han Yunqi remembered last night's dream very clearly. She closed her eyes, and everything was vivid in her mind. She quickly found the location of the wolf totem on the wordless monument. Here, the blood on the forehead is at this location. She pressed her thumb on the wordless monument. Long Fei Yi and the others looked at the empty black gold monument in disbelief. If it wasn't for Han Yunqi's dream, who would be able to find the mystery behind this empty black gold monument? Han Yunqi looked at Long Fei Yi and the others. She asked, Shall I start? Everyone immediately looked at Long Fei Yi, including Gu. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunqi's other hand and nodded decisively. Han Yunqi was determined. She broke her finger and squeezed out a drop of blood. She was about to press down on the wordless monument when Long Fei Yi suddenly held her hand and pressed it down with her. Very quickly, they let go of each other. Unlike yesterday, this time, Han Yunqi's blood stayed on the wordless monument for a while before it was absorbed. Once the blood disappeared on the wordless monument, it started to tremble. Following that, the entire altar started to shake. The shaking became more and more intense, as if there was a huge earthquake. Long Fei Yi protected Han Yunqi and retreated. The others also retreated. However, their eyes were fixed on the wordless monument, afraid that they would miss something. As expected, before long, the scene from Han Yunqi's dream appeared. The wordless monument suddenly split open in the middle. At first, it was just a long and narrow crack, but the crack quickly widened as if pulled by some invisible force. Gradually, it turned into a door. Rather than calling it a door, it would be better to call it a cave that led to an unknown world. The cave was so dark that no light could be seen. No one knew where they'd end up after this cave. Good heavens, this is the poison sect's biggest secret. Gu walked very close. Everyone was on guard, but he was the only one who didn't sense any danger. He quickly reached the entrance of the cave and turned back to look at Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. Are we really going in? Long Fei Yi nodded. Then what are you waiting for? I'll lead the way, Gu said as he pulled out a small luminous pearl from his sleeve. The luminous pearl gradually grew brighter in the darkness, quickly illuminating their surroundings. Let's walk in front. Gu, be careful, Han Yunqi said seriously. I'll lead the way, it's fine, Gu said as he prepared to step into the cave. Unfortunately, he couldn't get his foot in. It was as if he'd kicked something, for there was even a bang. You kicked the Xian Gold Monument? Han Yunqi asked suspiciously. Seems like it. Is it really that incredible? Gu refused to believe it and kicked at the cave. The kick almost sent him tumbling backwards. He staggered back a few steps before steadying himself. It really is the Xian Gold door. Poison lass, this isn't an illusion, is it? Gu asked in shock. Princess, you should go and try, Gu Beiwa said. His words reminded everyone. Han Yunqi was the one who'd opened the door, so perhaps she was the only one who could enter. A complicated look flashed past Long Fei Ye's eyes. He went forward and tried it himself. The result was the same as Gu's. Han Yunqi went forward and was about to try when Long Fei Yi grabbed her hand. Under the gazes of the crowd, Han Yunqi carefully took a step forward. This step actually made it inside. Moreover, the moment Han Yunqi stepped in, the cave exploded with a strong light. Following that was an invisible but strong suction force. It was as if it wanted to suck Han Yunqi in. Long Fei Yi was already on guard. Otherwise, Han Yunqi would have been dragged in by that force. However, Long Fei Yi's strength was soon unable to contend against the power of the cave. In the end, he gave up resisting and reached over with his other hand to hold Han Yunqi tight. As soon as Long Fei Yi gave up resisting, he and Han Yunqi were instantly sucked in. Catch them. Gu suddenly shouted and rushed over to grab Long Fei Yi's leg. Gu Beiwa immediately grabbed Gu's hand and flew into the cave with them. Bailey Mingxiang, Su Donglin, and the others were stunned. Then, they heard Gu Beiwa shout, Su Donglin, Miss Mingxiang, come here. Su Donglin was waiting for this. He grabbed Bailey Mingxiang and pulled Gu Beiwa's sleeve just as Gu Beiwa was about to enter the cave. After everyone had entered, the black hole gradually shrunk and disappeared in a short while. The Xian Gold door returned to its original appearance, as if nothing had happened. The surrounding Shadow Guard and Poison Guards looked at each other in disbelief. They could only stand guard and wait for Han Yunqi and the rest to return. Han Yunqi and the rest. Where did they go? Chapter 973. Falling in the darkness was like falling into a bottomless abyss, and it would never stop. Their surroundings were too dark. Han Yunqi opened her eyes wide, but she still couldn't see anything. This feeling was like being blind. Only by hugging Long Fei Yi tightly did the uneasiness in her heart fade away. No matter where they were in life or in death, at least he would be by her side. At least he had never let go of her hand. Han Yunqi didn't know that Gu and the rest had followed Long Fei Yi in by his feet. She also didn't know that there was no one under Long Fei Yi's feet. Gu and the rest were long gone. The wind whistled past their ears, causing their hair and robes to flutter in the wind. Han Yunqi wanted to talk to Long Fei, but as soon as she opened her mouth, her voice was drowned out by the wind. In the end, she gave up. She leaned into Long Fei Yi's embrace, thinking that since they were already here, she might as well take things as they came. She didn't want to think about anything else and just quietly hugged him. However, she didn't know why, but she kept feeling that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell what was wrong. This feeling was wrong. Only women had this kind of thing. It was like a sixth sense that couldn't be explained clearly. After some time, Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi finally saw light under their feet. They finally landed in a stone room. The stone room was sealed on all sides, and there was a stone door that was tightly shut. Han Yunshi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that she would see the world 3,000 years ago. She turned back and smiled at Long Fei Yi. "This place isn't bad, right?" Long Fei Yi replied with a faint smile. "Yeah." Han Yunshi glanced at him, turned around, and asked seriously, "Long Fei Yi, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Long Fei Yi seemed to pull himself together and smiled dotingly. "I'm fine." The stone chamber was empty except for the two of them. Han Yunshi looked around and asked suspiciously, "Gu and the rest didn't come in, right?" "I don't think so," Long Fei Yi said as he looked around and pulled Han Yunshi towards the stone door. He pushed the stone door, but it didn't budge. Could the mechanism to open the door be nearby? Han Yunshi started to search around the stone door. Long Fei Yi followed her. It wasn't clear what Long Fei touched, but the stone door abruptly moved and slowly opened. "Shall we go out and take a look?" Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunshi nodded. Long Fei Yi went out first, leaving Han Yunshi at the door. She was stunned for a moment, but quickly followed him. Outside the stone gate, there was actually a tall palace. In the palace, there was a standing statue of a god with a wolf head and a human body. The wolf head was exactly the same as the one on the wordless monument. The statue was at least 10 stories tall, imposing and mighty. Apart from this standing statue, there was nothing else in the huge palace. There were only 4 walls all around, and the walls were bare. It didn't look like a normal palace that had totemic characters carved on it. "What kind of monster is this?" Han Yunshi opened her mouth, and her voice echoed from all directions. She couldn't help but feel her hair stand on end. She thought to herself that if the little thing became like this, she wouldn't be able to take it. "There's no door here," Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunshi's attention shifted away from the statue, and she also noticed this problem. "Let's see if there's a mechanism," Han Yunshi said. She had an indescribable feeling that everything was very strange and unreal. They looked around, but didn't find any mechanism. Long Fei Yi raised his head to look at the statue and said seriously, "Could it be the statue?" Han Yunshi looked at the statue and didn't move for a long time. Long Fei Yi suddenly flew up to the statue and landed on the statue's shoulder. He started to search the statue. Han Yunshi raised her head to look at him, and a complicated look flashed past her eyes. With her current light body technique, she could fly up, but she didn't move. She just looked. Long Fei Yi looked at her. "Are you coming up?" Han Yunshi wanted to answer, but who knew that the statue suddenly broke into pieces. Long Fei Yi immediately flew up into the sky, and Han Yunshi hurriedly retreated. Who knew that the broken statue suddenly turned into a ball of blazing fire and shot up into the sky. It turned into a fire dragon and attacked Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't seem to expect this and couldn't dodge in time. He was hit by the fire dragon. As soon as the fire dragon hit Long Fei Yi, it immediately set his body on fire. Soon enough, Long Fei Yi's entire body fell to the ground. The raging flames surrounded him and burned his body. He knelt on one knee and reached out a hand to Han Yunshi. Save me. Yunshi, save me." Han Yunshi stared blankly, but didn't move. How was she supposed to save Long Fei Yi? There was nothing in this sealed stone room. Even if she wanted to, she didn't have the strength. Moreover, even if she had the strength, she might not save him. She simply watched as Long Fei was burned by the flames, completely unmoved. "Yunshi, come here. Yunshi, Han Yunshi, save me. Yunshi, come here. I can't take it anymore. Come here. Let me see you one last time." Han Yunshi didn't dare to meet Long Fei Yi's eyes. Instead of moving forward, she backed away. Long Fei Yi grew angry and demanded, "Han Yunshi, is this how you treat this crown prince? You said you'd never leave me." Han Yunshi, I thought you and I couldn't be born at the same time, but we'd definitely die at the same time. Ha ha ha, looks like I was too stupid." Long Fei Yi threw back his head and laughed as he spoke. His figure looked especially miserable and wretched in the flames. But Han Yunshi remained unmoved. Her expression was even cold-blooded. Faced with Long Fei's questions and accusations, she didn't say a word. She only backed away. Suddenly, Long Fei roared, "Han Yunshi, Long Fei, swear that I'll never love you again." Finally, Han Yunshi couldn't take it anymore. She shouted back, "You're not Long Fei. You're not. You don't have the right to swear on his name." She'd felt that something was off even before they'd landed in this mysterious palace. Now that they'd landed, her suspicions grew. Because Long Fei had let go of her hand. How could Long Fei let go of her hand in a place like this? Moreover, they were in the secret room. After the stone door opened, Long Fei had walked out first and left her behind. She'd even followed him in. Although Long Fei had held her hand as well, the feeling was completely different. The first time they'd gone to the poisonous herb depot, he'd held her hand and interlocked their fingers. After that, every time he held her hand, he'd unconsciously interlocked his fingers with hers. But this Long Fei in front of her didn't. Even after they'd landed, he didn't even ask her if she was feeling unwell. Actually, a woman's sixth sense didn't exist in this world. The so-called sixth sense was actually a woman's memory of details. Once the memory became a habit, the habit would be branded into the subconscious. Once there was a discrepancy between the details and the habit, the woman would start to feel that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell what it was. And when this feeling grew stronger, the woman would start to look for the abnormality in the details. Han Yunshi was very sure that although the man in front of her looked exactly like Long Fei, he was definitely not Long Fei. How could Long Fei send her death? How could it be? You're not him. Han Yunshi shouted. She didn't even look at the raging inferno and the fake Long Fei. She was afraid that if she looked at it for too long, she wouldn't be able to bear it. In the end, that appearance was too similar to him. She looked at the sealed walls around her and shouted, "Long Fei, where are you? Long Fei, how can you let go of my hand? Where are you?" As soon as she said this, a miraculous thing happened. The raging inferno behind Han Yunshi, including the fake Long Fei, suddenly disappeared. Unable to feel the temperature, Han Yunshi turned her head abruptly and found that a stone door had appeared on the wall where the statue was originally standing. The palace also disappeared, and the surroundings looked like an ordinary stone room. An illusion? Han Yunshi muttered to herself. Other than an illusion, what else would suddenly disappear? She should have entered an illusion, which was why she saw an illusion. Then what about Long Fei? Where was Long Fei at this moment? Would Long Fei also experience such an illusion? Would Long Fei recognize that all of this was fake? Han Yunshi couldn't care so much. She shook her head to keep herself awake. If she was really in an illusion, then it was most important to stay awake. Because it was both real and fake, she didn't know what would happen or who she would meet. It was more appropriate for her to quickly find someone. She quickly touched the mechanism beside the stone door. However, when the stone door slowly turned and opened, she was stunned. She saw Long Fei standing outside the door. Han Yunshi was stunned. She didn't move or make a sound for a long time. She couldn't be sure if this Long Fei was real or fake. The Long Fei in the illusion just now was clearly trying to kill her. That was an illusion that could take a person's life. It was an illusion that made use of emotions to kill people. And Long Fei outside the door also seemed to be a little surprised. He didn't move and didn't make a sound. The two of them just stood like this, one inside the door and one outside the door. They looked at each other and stood for a long time. Han Yunshi hesitated for a long time, just as she was about to test him, who knew that Long Fei would suddenly walk over. Han Yunshi subconsciously retreated. Long Fei forced himself to stop in front of her. The two of them were so close that they were almost touching each other. Han Yunshi still wanted to retreat, but Long Fei suddenly reached out his hand and rubbed her bangs. Han Yunshi was shocked. She looked at him in disbelief. Her heart suddenly jumped wildly. Could it be that this person in front of her was really Long Fei? She hurriedly took his hand and interlocked her fingers with his. And the moment she grasped Long Fei's hand, Long Fei immediately tightened his grip and pulled her into his embrace without a word. This domineering aura was so familiar. This embrace was so familiar. Han Yunqi couldn't help but hug him tightly. Long Fei, it's you. It's really you. Long Fei hugged her for a long time. He let out a long breath before saying, Han Yunqi, I'm scared. He had just encountered an illusion. In the illusion, Han Yunqi was swallowed by a fire transformed from a wolf-headed idol. She was crying and begging him in the raging fire, asking him to save her. But he couldn't do it. The moment he checked in her hand, he felt that something was wrong. Now, this woman was the real Han Yunqi. After he saw through the illusion, he searched for her like a madman. He barged through countless stone chambers and finally arrived here. Chapter 974. Long Fei and Han Yunqi hugged each other tightly. It would be a lie to say that they weren't afraid when they saw each other's illusion being burned by the fire. Han Yunqi told Long Fei about her experience, and Long Fei also told Han Yunqi about his experience. The illusion they encountered was actually the same. It had to be said that this illusion was very cruel. In this world, there was nothing more cruel than watching the person you loved being burned alive. Is this illusion testing us? Han Yunqi asked suspiciously. Testing what? Long Fei was also pondering. This illusion was indeed like a test. He didn't know if he would die or receive other punishments if he really jumped into the fire to save the fake Han Yunqi. I don't understand. Han Yunqi didn't want to recall this cruel thing. She asked seriously, what about Gu and the rest? Do they follow us in? The fake Long Fei told her that Gu and the rest didn't come in. She didn't know whether it was true or not, so it was better to confirm it. Others don't know. Gu Qixiao should have. He grabbed my leg. Then I don't know how he disappeared. Long Fei said. Their fall had been so strong that their hair and robes fluttered in the wind. He couldn't remember when Gu Qixiao had let go of his leg, either. Strange. Han Yunqi was very suspicious. Long Fei, when did you let go of me? Long Fei immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. He could ignore Gu, but he must have protected Han Yunqi well. He had been holding her hand tightly all this time. Strange, I didn't let go of you either. Han Yunqi was more and more confused. At this time, they didn't have time to think about this problem. It was good that both of them were safe. They had to figure out where they were and where Gu was. Also, how were they supposed to leave this godforsaken place? Hurry up and find Gu. Han Yunqi said seriously. There was only one secret room behind her, and there was nothing else to look for. Thus, Long Fei brought her back the way they came. They passed through several stone rooms and finally arrived at a palace. There were stone doors on all four sides of the palace. Long Fei took the east gate. Take a look at the west gate, Han Yunqi said. The fastest way was to split up and search, but she didn't dare to let go of Long Fei's hand. Long Fei wouldn't let go of her hand either. Just as the two of them were about to open the western stone door, the southern and northern stone doors opened at the same time. Gu Beiwei walked out from the southern stone door, while Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang walked out from the western stone door. This, Han Yunqi and Long Fei simultaneously became alert. Gu Beiwei and the other two also came in. Were the three people in front of them real or fake? When Gu Beiwei and the other two saw Han Yunqi and Long Fei, they were overjoyed. Princess, Your Highness, are you all right? Gu Beiwei strode over. Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin also hurried over. Bailey Mingxiang didn't say anything, but the joy in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Su Donglin was extremely excited. Your Highness, Princess, we finally found you. Long Fei and Han Yunqi didn't say anything. Gu Beiwei and the other two quickly realized that something was wrong. The three of them looked at each other in confusion. Princess, Your Highness, are you all right? Gu Beiwei asked tentatively. Both Han Yunqi and Long Fei were trying to figure out how to tell if the three were real or fake. It seemed a little difficult. Who knew that at this moment, A miserable cry suddenly rang out. Poison Lass! Han Yunchi was shocked. She immediately recognized the voice. Its seventh young master. Gu Beiwei became anxious. The voice seems to be coming from the west. Let's go. Long Fei Yi pulled Han Yunchi and strode over. For the time being, they didn't care whether Gu Beiwei and the other two were real or fake. They opened the stone door to the west and walked in. To their surprise, they found a towering palace inside. The palace was empty and there was nothing inside. Only Gu was sitting alone on the ground, crying loudly. His hands seemed to be hugging something, and his actions were as strange as they could be. Seeing this, everyone felt their hairs stand on end. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunchi glanced at each other. They couldn't tell if this was an illusion or reality. Gu seems to be hugging someone, Su Donglin muttered. Indeed, Gu Qixiao's actions made it seem like he was holding someone in his arms. Was he possessed? No one dared to make a sound. Just as they were about to walk closer to take a look, Gu suddenly cried even louder. Poison Lass, wake up, will you? I'm begging you. Poison Lass, no matter what you've done to me, I've never blamed or resented you. But if you don't wake up this time, Chi brother will never forgive you for the rest of his life. For the rest of his life. Gu's tears really kept falling. He cried heartbreakingly, hoarsely and soundlessly. When everyone heard this, they were all stunned. Han Yunchi was at a loss. What's wrong with this guy? He's crying over me like I've done all sorts of wrong things to him. It's like I've died. Soon enough, everyone slowly turned to look at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi's face was so cold that it could freeze all of Cloud Realm continent. Especially when Gu shouted, Poison Lass, don't die, will you? Long Fei Yi's last shred of reason crumbled as he roared. Gu! His roar echoed throughout the palace, echoing for a long time without stopping. Gu Qixiao, who had been crying his heart out, suddenly gave a start before his cries stopped abruptly. He looked at his hands and seemed frightened as he shot to his feet and backed away a few steps. He stared blankly at the floor, his face filled with fear. Gu, what are you doing? Long Fei Yi roared again. Gu finally looked back, only to see Han Yunchi standing perfectly fine by Long Fei Yi's side. He rushed over and pulled Han Yunchi into a tight embrace. His speed was godlike. Even Long Fei Yi couldn't stop him in time. Poison Lass, you... Gu hugged her so tightly that he couldn't speak. Let go. Let go. Han Yunchi struggled, not because she was afraid of Long Fei Yi's anger, but because if Gu didn't let go, she'd suffocate to death. Very soon, Long Fei Yi grabbed Gu's hands and yanked them away without a word. This force didn't break Gu's bones, so it could only be said that Gu was lucky. Gu seemed to have completely regained his senses as he looked at Long Fei Yi in a daze. Long Fei Yi didn't care what had happened to him, as he shook violently and sent him flying. Gu crashed heavily against the stone wall and bounced back before he hit the ground and fell flat on his face. Han Yunchi took deep breaths, not knowing why Gu was crying for her, but she had almost been strangled to death. Gu Qixiao raised his head, 2 streams of breath trickling down his nose to mix with the tears on his face. His devastatingly beautiful face was now a blur. But when he saw Han Yunchi standing there perfectly fine, he suddenly smiled. The smile that bloomed amidst the blood and tears was so pure and bright. He even forgot to quarrel with Long Fei Yi and muttered to himself, Poison Lass, it's so good to see you. Long Fei Yi was about to speak when Gu Beiwei beat him to it. Seventh young master, what happened to you just now? Gu glanced at the original spot and hurriedly stood up, wiping his face with his large hands to sober himself up. He recounted what had just happened. He had pulled Gu Beiwei in, but for some reason, he had suddenly fallen here alone. There was a tall statue of a god with a wolf head and a human body. Poison Lass was kneeling in front of it in worship. He had even chatted with Poison Lass about something, but later on, the statue suddenly turned into a fire dragon and swallowed Poison Lass whole. He threw himself into the sea of flames to save her. But the moment he jumped into the raging flames, the flames were immediately extinguished but Poison Lass. Poison Lass had also stopped breathing. He had been hugging Poison Lass and crying for a long time. And just now, when Long Fei Yi had shouted at him, Poison Lass had immediately disappeared from his embrace. Only then did he realize that everything was fake. As Gu Qixiao spoke, he kept his eyes on Han Yunxi, afraid that she'd suddenly disappear. He was afraid that everything before him was nothing more than a beautiful dream he'd had because of his grief, so he could comfort himself. After hearing this, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi looked at each other at the same time, feeling a lingering fear. So this was the consequence of jumping into the fire to save her. If they hadn't found this place, would Gu have always thought that Han Yunxi was dead? Han Yunxi couldn't imagine what would have happened if she had mistakenly thought that Long Fei Yi was dead. Perhaps she would have been 100 times more heartbroken than Gu. Perhaps she wouldn't have lived. Long Fei Yi wasn't as angry as before. He looked at Gu with a particularly deep gaze. Everyone needed time to digest what Gu had said. Although Han Yunxi and Long Fei had experienced it firsthand, they couldn't help but reflect on Gu Qixiao's bitter tears and his true feelings. What exactly was this illusion testing? Why was Gu immersed in the illusion and unable to wake up when he had thrown himself into the sea of flames to save her? And the two of them had hardened their hearts to not save her and had instead succeeded in shattering the illusion? Gu Beiyue broke the silence. Seventh young master, it was an illusion just now, wasn't it? Upon hearing this, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this Gu was real, and what they had seen wasn't an illusion. Why was Gu the only one who encountered it? Su Donglin couldn't help but ask. You didn't encounter it either? Han Yunxi asked hurriedly. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang shook their heads. Han Yunxi was even more certain about this. It seemed that the Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang in front of her were also real. Gu asked suspiciously, Why, Poison Girl? You encounter it too? What kind of illusions did you encounter? Since everyone was here, there was nothing to hide. Long Fei Yi immediately told them about the illusion that she and Han Yunxi had encountered. However, after they finished speaking, everyone fell silent and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. What's wrong? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.